Hey guys, tonight we begin with Europe's most powerful queens, sleeping in rooms that smelled like rotting teeth, menstrual blood, and chamber pots, full of shit. While you might imagine royal bedrooms as perfumed sanctuaries, the reality was months of unwashed bodies, festering cosmetics, and air so thick with stench you could taste it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you are tuning in from and what time it is for you. It is always fascinating to see who is joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Picture yourself entering the bedchamber of Queen Elizabeth I of England at Hampton Court Palace, summer of 1590. You are a lady in waiting, one of the privileged few allowed into the Queen's private rooms. You push open the heavy door, and the smell hits you like a physical force. Your eyes water, your stomach lurches. You fight the urge to gag. This is the private chamber of the most powerful woman in England, and it smells like death. The first smell is body odour, not the mild scent of someone who skipped a shower, but the thick, rancid smell of a body that hasn't been properly washed in months. Queen Elizabeth bathes approximately once a month, which she considers exceptionally clean. Most of her contemporaries bathe even less frequently. The smell of accumulated sweat, body oils, and dead skin cells fills the room. It is a sour, organic smell that coats the back of your throat. The Queen is 57 years old. Her body produces the stronger odours of an aging woman, hormonal changes creating sharper, more pungent sweat. She is going through menopause, experiencing hot flashes that drench her in perspiration. The sweat soaks into her multiple layers of clothing, which are never washed. The fabric absorbs the sweat, and when it dries it leaves behind crystallized salts and concentrated odour. Then she sweats again, re-wetting the dried sweat, reactivating the smell. Layers upon layers of dried and reactivated sweat create a stench that is almost visible in its intensity. The Queen's undergarments, her linen shift worn next to her skin, hasn't been changed in weeks. This shift absorbs everything her body secretes: sweat, yes, but also vaginal discharge, traces of urine from imperfect wiping, the oils her skin naturally produces. The shift is the repository of all her body's outputs, and it is never washed thoroughly enough to remove the accumulated biological material. Over the unwashed shift, Elizabeth wears her corset and elaborate gowns. These outer garments are made of heavy fabrics, velvet, silk, brocade, that also absorb sweat and body odours. These garments are never washed, ever. They're too elaborate, too expensive, too delicate. They're worn repeatedly, sometimes for years, absorbing the Queen's body odours day after day, month after month. The fabric becomes saturated with the smell of her unwashed body. According to research by Dr. David Starkey on Tudor court life, Elizabeth I was known for her obsessive concern with appearances, but had the same hygiene limitations as everyone else of her era. She owned hundreds of elaborate gowns, constantly ordering new ones, but they were all equally filthy with body odours. Wealth could buy more clothes, but couldn't make them washable. The Queen's magnificent wardrobe was a collection of beautiful, foul-smelling garments, but body odour is just the beginning. Your nose detects another smell, sweet, sickly, with an undertone of rot. This is the smell of the Queen's face. Elizabeth's face is painted with thick white makeup cerus, a paste made from white lead and vinegar. The lead is toxic, gradually poisoning her, but it creates the fashionable pale complexion. The paste is applied in thick layers over her skin, which is never properly cleaned. Old makeup mixes with new sweat, skin oils, and dead skin cells accumulate under the makeup. The lead reacts with the sulfur compounds in her sweat, creating a chemical smell, metallic and sharp. The makeup is never fully removed. At night, the queen might wipe her face with a dry cloth, but the serous remains embedded in her pores, in the fine lines of her aging face, in the crevices around her nose and mouth. Bacteria grow in this mixture of makeup, sweat, and skin cells. The bacterial growth creates a smell, sweet and rotten at the same time, like meat that is starting to spoil. Elizabeth's face is scarred from smallpox, which she contracted at age 29. The scars are deep pits in her skin. The makeup fills these pits, but it also traps bacteria and dead skin cells in them. The pitted scars are essentially pockets of rotting organic matter covered with toxic lead paste. When she sweats, the moisture releases the smell, a concentrated version of the general facial odor, emanating specifically from the scarred areas. She wears rouge made from cochineal, crushed insects, mixed with egg white and various other ingredients. This organic mixture sits on her cheeks, also never fully removed, also accumulating bacteria. The combination of lead white and cochineal rouge and human secretions creates a complex chemical smell, metallic, sweet, rotten, and acidic, all at once. Now notice another smell cutting through the others, the unmistakable smell of bad breath, but magnified to an almost unbearable degree. Elizabeth's teeth are rotting in her mouth. She is English nobility in an era when sugar is a luxury good that the wealthy consume in shocking quantities. Elizabeth loves sugar, candied fruits, sweetmeats, marzipan. She eats sugar constantly, and it is destroying her teeth. By her 50s, many of Elizabeth's teeth are black with decay. Some have fallen out. Others are obsessed pockets of infection in her gums and jawbone. The smell of decaying teeth and infected gums is the smell of necrosis, of tissue dying inside her mouth. When she speaks or breathes, she exhales this smell of death directly from her mouth. The abscesses in her mouth periodically rupture, draining pus. The pus, thick, yellow-green, foul-smelling, flows into her mouth. She swallows it or spits it discreetly into a cloth, but the smell of pus is always there, emanating from her mouth. It is a smell of infection, of bacteria multiplying in pockets of dead tissue. It is the smell of septic material that should be treated medically, but is instead just accepted as normal. According to dental historian Dr. Christine Hillam at the University of Liverpool, Elizabeth I's dental decay was so severe by her later years that foreign ambassadors commented on it in their reports. They described her breath as most offensive and noted black teeth visible when she spoke. But they couldn't refuse audience with the Queen, so they endured the smell of her rotting mouth while conducting diplomatic business. Shift your attention now to another smell in the room, the unmistakable odour of a chamber pot. In the corner of the bedchamber, partially hidden behind a screen, or under the bed, sits the Queen's close stool, a portable toilet, essentially a fancy wooden box with a velvet seat covering a chamber pot. The Queen uses this to urinate and defecate during the night. The chamber pot is emptied by servants each morning, but the smell lingers. Urine soaks into the wooden box of the close stool. Traces of feces remain in the pot no matter how carefully it is cleaned. The velvet seat absorbs urine, splashes from imperfect aim, or simply from being in the humid atmosphere of urine fumes rising from the pot below. The velvet, like all the fabric in this room, is never properly cleaned. It smells of old urine, the sharp ammonia smell of decomposing urea. During the night, between when the Queen uses the close stool and when servants empty it in the morning, the waste sits there, urine and feces in a chamber pot, slowly decomposing, releasing gases. The smell of concentrated human waste fills the room. In summer, flies are attracted to the chamber pot. They buzz around it, land on it, then fly around the room, landing on the Queen's food, her face, her belongings. The Queen also has periods until menopause. She menstruates monthly. She uses cloth rags to absorb the blood, rags that are washed inadequately and reused. During her period, the smell of menstrual blood adds to the miasma of the room, a metallic, organic smell of blood and uterine tissue. The bloodied rags are stored somewhere in the room until they can be taken away for washing. They sit, accumulating, festering, the smell of old blood oxidized, beginning to decompose, joins all the other smells. Now breathe deeper and detect the smell of the room itself, not just the Queen's body. The bedchamber is kept warm, fires burn in the fireplace, even in summer because Elizabeth feels cold easily as she ages. The warmth intensifies every smell, causing organic materials to decompose faster and release odours more readily. The bed itself, an enormous four-poster bed with heavy fabric hangings, is a source of smell. The mattress is filled with straw or feathers, both of which accumulate moisture from the Queen's body. When she sleeps, she sweats. The sweat soaks into the sheets through to the mattress filling. The mattress never fully dries. Damp organic material, straw or feathers, begins to rot. The mattress smells of mildew, of organic decomposition. It also harbours fleas and bed bugs, which add their own smell. A musty, slightly sweet odour of insect infestation. The sheets are linen, changed perhaps once a week if Elizabeth is fastidious, less often if not. But a week is long enough for the sheets to become saturated with sweat, body oils, and whatever other secretions come from a sleeping body. The sheets smell of body odour, plus a stale smell of fabric that has been slept in repeatedly without washing. The heavy fabric hangings around the bed, thick curtains meant to provide warmth and privacy, are never washed. They absorb everything: smoke from the fireplace, body odours, breath, farts. Yes, the Queen farts, and in the enclosed space of the curtained bed, the smell has nowhere to go. The bed curtains are repositories of accumulated smells. When you draw them closed at night, you are creating a sealed environment filled with concentrated human odours. The room has tapestries on the walls, elaborate woven artworks depicting mythological or historical scenes. These tapestries are beautiful and expensive. They're also never cleaned. They absorb smoke from the fireplace, dampness from the air, and they attract moths and other insects that eat the wool fibres. The decomposition of the wool, the presence of insect larvae, the accumulation of dust and smoke all create a musty, old smell of organic materials slowly breaking down. The floor might be covered with rushes, dried grass and herbs spread on the floor to provide insulation and absorb spills. The rushes are supposed to be changed regularly, but in practice, new rushes are just layered over old ones. The bottom layers become compacted, damp, rotting. Food scraps, spilled wine, tracked in mud, dog feces. The Queen keeps small dogs that aren't house-trained, and various other organic materials accumulate in the rushes. The smell from the floor is of decomposing plant matter mixed with all the refuse of daily life. According to research by historian Dr. Malcolm Thick on Tudor domestic life, rush floors were notorious sources of foul smells. Erasmus, the Dutch humanist who visited England, wrote in disgust about English floors covered with old rushes containing spittle, vomit, the urine of dogs and men, the dregs of beer, the remains of fish and other nameless filth. This was true in ordinary houses and in royal palaces. The Queen walked on the same type of filthy, foul-smelling floor covering as everyone else. Now notice the smell of the Queen's hair, Elizabeth's hair. What remains of it is problematic. In her youth she had auburn hair, but by her 50s much of it has fallen out. Hair loss is partly age, partly due to the toxic lead in her face makeup, partly from the harsh treatments she has applied to her scalp over the years. She wears elaborate wigs made from human hair, often from corpses or from poor women who sold their hair for money. The wig is never cleaned properly. It sits on Elizabeth's head for hours each day, absorbing the sweat from her scalp. The wig is removed at night, but the natural oils from her scalp, the sweat, and the pomades and scents applied to the wig accumulate. The human hair of the wig begins to smell like a scalp, but worse because it is not attached to a living head producing fresh oils. It is dead hair accumulating the secretions of Elizabeth's scalp without any of the natural cleaning mechanisms of a living scalp. Under the wig, Elizabeth's own remaining hair is thin and greasy. It is rarely washed. Hair washing in this era is infrequent, requiring enormous effort. Her scalp is oily, flaky with dandruff, and itchy. She scratches, creating sores on her scalp that weep and crust over. The smell of her scalp wounds minor infections, dried blood, serous fluid, adds another layer to the hair smell. When she removes her wig at night, the smell of her damaged scalp is released into the room. A smell of sick skin, infection, and accumulated grease. The Queen's ladies in waiting also contribute to the smell of the room. You, as one of these ladies, smell as bad as the Queen. You also bathe rarely, wear unwashed clothes, have rotting teeth. When multiple women are in the closed bedchamber, the combined body odour is overwhelming. It is not just one unwashed body, but 3 or 4, all creating their own odour signatures that blend into a collective stench of unwashed humanity. The ladies handle the Queen's body, helping her dress and undress, applying her makeup, emptying her chamber pot. Your hands smell of the Queen's waist, of the cosmetics you've rubbed into her skin, of the pomades you've applied to her wig. You are a vector of smell yourself, spreading the Queen's odours through your own hands and body. Perfume is supposed to help with all these smells. Elizabeth uses perfume liberally, floral scents like rose and lavender, musk from animal glands, civet from cat anal secretions, ambergris from whale intestines. These perfumes are strong, almost overwhelming in their intensity, but perfume doesn't eliminate body odour, it just layers on top of it. The result is a combination smell: rotten teeth plus rose water, unwashed body plus musk, chamber pot urine plus lavender. The perfume mixing with natural body odours creates complex smell combinations that are often worse than body odour alone. According to research on Tudor perfumes by Dr. Susan Vincent at the University of York, perfumes in Elizabeth's era were used to mask smells rather than enhance cleanliness. The theory was that strong smells could overpower bad smells. In practice, the perfumes mixed with body odours in unpleasant ways. Also, the perfumes themselves were often made with animal products that had their own foul base smells. Musk and civet both smell somewhat fecal in their natural form. Pleasant perfumes of the era would smell strange and often unpleasant to modern noses. Let's examine a specific day in detail. It is July 1595. The weather is hot temperatures in the high 70s or low 80s Fahrenheit, around 25 to 27 Celsius. The bedchamber windows are closed. Fresh air is considered dangerous, potentially bringing in miasmas that cause disease. The room is stuffy, hot and airless. Every smell is intensified by the heat and lack of ventilation. The Queen wakes in the morning in her bed. She has been sleeping in her linen shift, the same shift she has been wearing for 2 weeks. The shift is saturated with sweat from hot nights. She has been having hot flashes, waking multiple times in the night drenched in sweat. The shift is damp, clinging to her body. The smell of sweat is sharp and immediate when she emerges from the bed curtains. She has urinated during the night, got up and used the close stool. The chamber pot contains urine that has been sitting for hours in the hot room. The smell of ammonia is strong. She also defecated. The chamber pot contains feces that are beginning to smell strongly of decomposition in the heat. Her ladies in waiting enter the room. They react to the smell. You can see it in their faces. A slight wince, a brief holding of breath, but they say nothing. You don't comment on the Queen's smells. You pretend not to notice the miasma of body odour, bad breath, and chamber pot waste. You breathe through your mouth and go about your duties. The chamber pot is removed and emptied by a lower servant, but the smell remains. The close stool itself smells. The air is thick with a smell of human waste. Opening the windows would help, but that is not done because of the fear of bad air entering. The Queen is dressed. Her ladies remove her sweaty shift. For a brief moment, her naked body is exposed. The smell of her unwashed skin intensifies. All the areas hidden by clothing release their accumulated odors. Her armpits are dark with old sweat stains and smell sharply of body odor. Her genital area smells of urine, old menstrual blood. She is post-menopausal now, but the smell lingers in her body, and the particular smell of unwashed female genitals. Her feet smell of sweat, and the shoes she wears day after day without washing her feet. A fresh shift is put on, fresh being relative. It has been worn before but was washed since its last wearing. However, the washing wasn't thorough enough to remove all odours, and the shift has a musty smell of linen that was dried inadequately and stored damp. Still, it is fresher than the sweat-drenched shift she has been wearing, so it represents an improvement. The corset and multiple layers of clothing are added. Each garment smells of previous wearing, sweat absorbed into fabric that can't be washed. By the time Elizabeth is fully dressed, she is wearing multiple layers of odorous fabric. The heat of the day will cause her to sweat into these clothes, adding fresh sweat to the old odors already present in the fabric. Her face is painted. Old makeup is not removed first. New makeup is just applied over old. The smell of cerus, the lead paste mixed with vinegar, is sharp and chemical. The vinegar smell mixes with the rotting smell of bacteria growing under the old makeup. As the makeup is applied, the smell intensifies, spreading through the room. The ladies applying the makeup get it on their hands. Now their hands smell of lead paste and the Queen's decomposing facial skin. Rouge is applied to her cheeks. Belladonna drops are put in her eyes to dilate her pupils. Large pupils are considered beautiful. The belladonna has its own smell, slightly bitter herbal. The Queen's eyes water from the drops, creating smudged makeup that will need to be reapplied, which means more cerus, more chemical smell layering on existing smells. The wig is placed on her head. The wig smells of stale hair and old pomade. When positioned on her scalp, it traps heat against her head, causing her scalp to sweat. The sweat will soak into the wig, adding to the accumulated secretions already present in the hairpiece. By evening, the wig will smell noticeably worse than it does now in the morning. Elizabeth spends the day in her chambers meeting with advisors, doing paperwork, receiving select visitors. Throughout the day she is producing more smell. She sweats in her heavy clothes. Her breath, already foul from rotting teeth, gets worse as the day progresses and she eats sweets. She uses the close stool several times, each use adding more waste to the chamber pot, until it is emptied again in the evening. The bedchamber becomes progressively stuffier and more foul-smelling as the day goes on. Multiple bodies in a closed room, all producing sweat and breath and other secretions. Food is brought to the room. The Queen eats in her chambers. Food smells mix with body odours. Some food is spilled or dropped on the rush floor, where it will slowly rot and attract insects. By evening, the room is at peak foulness. The heat of the day has intensified every smell. The Queen's makeup is melting slightly in the heat, the cerus mixing with sweat, creating a smell of warm lead and decomposing skin secretions. Her breath, after a day of eating sweets, is horrific. Her body odour has intensified from a day of sweating into already sweaty clothes. The chamber pot is full. The room has been occupied by people all day with no proper ventilation. The air is thick, humid, and so saturated that it feels almost solid. This is when you prepare the Queen for bed. You help her undress. Each layer of clothing removed releases trapped odours. The smell of her body that has been contained all day by multiple layers of fabric suddenly released into the air. By the time she is down to her shift, the smell is intense enough to make your eyes water, but you maintain your composure. You don't react. This is normal. This is just how people smell. Everyone at court smells like this or worse. The Queen gets into bed. The bed curtains are drawn closed. She is now in an enclosed space with all her smells, breathing her own breath back at herself, marinating in the odours of her body and her unwashed bedding. This is how she sleeps every night. You retreat from the bedchamber. As you close the door behind you, you take a deep breath of the hallway air. It is not fresh. The hallway also smells of unwashed bodies, of smoke from fires of General Palace, funk, but it is less concentrated than the Queen's bedchamber. Your relief is palpable. According to research by Dr. Holly Dugan at George Washington University on sensory experience in early modern England, the intensity of smells that people lived with would be unbearable to modern people. But early modern people had different smell tolerance. They were habituated to body odours, to waste smells, to the general funk of daily life without modern sanitation. What would make us vomit was just normal background smell to them. Now let's travel to France and enter the bedchamber of Marie Antoinette at Versailles, summer of 1785. Marie Antoinette is 29 years old, Queen of France, living in one of the most elaborate palaces in Europe. Her bedchamber is in the Palace of Versailles, a room of incredible opulence, gilded everything, elaborate paintings, crystal chandeliers, the finest furniture, and it smells absolutely horrific. The first thing you notice is the smell of hundreds of people. Versailles is crowded. Thousands of people live and work in the palace. Marie Antoinette's bedchamber is semi-public. Courtiers have the right to watch her wake up, get dressed, and go to bed as part of elaborate court ceremonies called the lever, waking, and coucher, bedtime. This means dozens of people crowd into her bedchamber morning and evening, all of them unwashed, all producing body odour. The combined smell of 50-plus unwashed bodies in one room is staggering. It is not just one person's body odour, but a collective miasma of human smell, sweat, bad breath, flatulence, and the general funk of bodies that never get properly clean. Some courtiers have been standing in the room for hours waiting for the ceremony to begin. They're sweating in their elaborate clothes, adding fresh sweat to old sweat already absorbed in their garments. Marie Antoinette herself smells of body odour, despite being royalty. She bathes more frequently than previous generations of French royalty, perhaps once a month or even more often, which is considered quite clean, but a month or even 2 weeks between baths means significant body odour accumulations. She sweats in her elaborate gowns, in her corsets, in her undergarments. The sweat is absorbed by fabric that is never washed. Her particular body odour has a youthful quality. She is only 29, still producing the hormones of a reproductive age woman. But she has also had 4 pregnancies, resulting in 4 living children by 1785, and her body shows the effects. Her breasts have been through pregnancy and breastfeeding, though she nursed only briefly before handing children to wet nurses. Her genital area has been through 4 childbirths. Her body produces the secretions of a woman who has been pregnant multiple times. Vaginal discharge, slight urinary incontinence from stretched pelvic floor muscles, the particular smell of a body that has been through reproductive trauma. Marie Antoinette wears enormous quantities of perfume to mask her body odour. She favours floral scents, rose particularly, also orange blossom and violet. The perfumes are very strong, much stronger than modern perfumes. They have to be strong to have any hope of masking body odour. But the result is an overwhelming smell of flowers mixed with underlying body odour. It is too much perfume plus not enough bathing, creating a smell that is cloying and sickly, sweet with an undertone of human funk. According to research by historian Dr. Caroline Weber on Marie Antoinette's life at Versailles, the Queen was known for her love of perfumes and frequent bathing by 18th century standards. But this didn't make her smell good by modern standards. It just made her smell like heavily perfumed unwashed body instead of unperfumed unwashed body. Courtiers commented on her distinctive scent, a combination of her favourite rose perfume and the natural smell of her body. Now notice the smell of the room itself. Versailles has a serious sanitation problem. The palace was built without adequate toilet facilities for the thousands of people living there. There are some cabinets decent, indoor toilets, but not nearly enough. Most people urinate and defecate in chamber pots, behind curtains, in corners of rooms, anywhere they can find momentary privacy. The hallways of Versailles notoriously smell of urine and feces from people using corners as impromptu toilets. Marie Antoinette's bedchamber is better than the hallways. She has a chaise perky literally pierced chair, the French version of a close stool for her personal use. But the smell of the chamber pot is still present in the room. The pot is emptied regularly by servants, but the chair itself absorbs odours. Urine soaks into the wood and fabric of the chair. The smell never fully dissipates. Also, Versailles has a serious problem with sewage from thousands of people accumulating in inadequate systems. Some of this sewage seeps into the foundations, creating foul smells that permeate the entire palace. On hot days, the smell of sewage rises from the walls and floors. You are in one of the most luxurious rooms in the most elaborate palace in Europe, and it smells like a sewer. The bedchamber has poor ventilation despite having windows. The windows are kept closed to prevent bad air from entering and to maintain temperature control. The result is stale, humid air that never properly circulates. Every smell is trapped in this enclosed space: body odours, chamber pot, perfumes, the smell of the many people who crowd the room during ceremonies. Now focus on Marie Antoinette's hair. She is famous for her elaborate hairstyles, enormous constructions of her own hair mixed with false hair pieces, powdered with white powder, decorated with ribbons and jewels and sometimes miniature ships, or bird cages or other ornaments. These elaborate hairstyles take hours to create and are maintained for days or even weeks without being taken down. The Queen sleeps with her hair arranged on a special pillow designed to preserve the style. The hair powder is made from wheat flour or potato starch. It is applied liberally to create the fashionable white or grey colour. The powder sits in her hair for days. It absorbs the oils from her scalp, but it also creates a paste when mixed with sweat. In the heat, Marie Antoinette sweats, and the sweat mixes with the powder, creating a sticky paste on her scalp. This paste attracts dirt, dead skin cells, and creates perfect conditions for bacterial growth. The hairstyle becomes infested. Lice love the environment warm, moist, full of food sources, skin cells and scalp oils. They multiply in her hair. Marie Antoinette can feel them crawling. It is maddening, but she can't scratch properly without disturbing the elaborate hairstyle. She uses a special scratching stick, a long implement designed to reach through the hairstyle to the scalp without disrupting the arrangement. She scratches constantly, but the relief is temporary. The smell of her hair is complex. The musty smell of powder, the rancid smell of scalp oils going rancid in the heat, the particular smell of lice infestation, slightly sweet, musty, and underlying all of it the smell of scalp sweat. When the hairstyle is finally taken down after days or weeks, the smell released is intense, accumulated sweat, and oil and powder, and lice all trapped in elaborate curls, suddenly exposed to air. According to research by Dr. Caroline Weber in Queen of Fashion, Marie Antoinette's hair was often described as magnificent and also as problematic. The elaborate styles required so much time and effort that taking them down and rebuilding them daily was impractical. Maintaining styles for extended periods was normal, despite the hygiene problems this created. The Queen of France walked around with weak old hairstyles infested with lice, because fashion demanded it. Let's focus now on Marie Antoinette's cosmetics. She uses makeup, though less heavily than Elizabeth I did. French fashion in the 1780s favours a more natural look, but natural still means lead-based white powder to lighten the complexion, rouge made from carmine, crushed insects, and various other cosmetics. The white powder is lead-based, toxic, gradually poisoning her. It is applied over her face and neck and chest to create an even pale complexion. The powder mixes with sweat and skin oils to create a paste that sits on her skin. Under this paste, her skin can't breathe. Pores become clogged. She develops acne and small infections under the makeup. These infected spots smell tiny pockets of bacteria and pus under a layer of lead powder. The rouge is applied to her cheeks. It is made from carmine cochineal insects, crushed into powder and mixed with binding agents. This organic mixture sits on her skin, never fully removed, accumulating bacteria. The smell is faintly metallic and sweet from the insect-based pigment. Her lips are coloured with vermilion, a pigment made from mercury sulfide. Mercury is toxic, absorbed through the skin of her lips. The vermilion has a faint metallic smell. It also tastes metallic if she licks her lips or if it gets in her mouth. She is gradually being poisoned by her cosmetics, and part of that poisoning comes through as a smell, metallic and chemical, overlaying the organic smells of skin and sweat. Now notice another smell in the room, the smell of food. Marie Antoinette is famous for her appetite. She eats elaborate meals, lots of rich foods, meats, pastries, sweets. Food is brought to her chambers. Sometimes she eats meals in her bedchamber rather than in the formal dining rooms. The smells of food linger, roasted meats, butter and cream from pastries, the sweet smell of desserts. But in the hot, closed room, food smells begin to turn slightly rancid. Butter goes rancid. Meat smell becomes slightly putrid. The combination of fresh food and food beginning to spoil creates a sickly, sweet smell. Food is spilled on her clothes on the floor. Crumbs and drops accumulate in the carpet and furniture. These attract insects, ants, flies, sometimes mice. The presence of vermin adds to the smell. Mouse droppings have a distinctive sharp, ammonia-like smell. Mice nesting in walls or furniture create musky odours. The palace has a serious rodent problem, and Marie Antoinette's bedchamber is not exempt. Let's examine a specific incident. It is August 1785, a particularly hot summer. Marie Antoinette is pregnant with her fourth child. She is about 4 months along. Pregnancy affects her body's smells in specific ways. She is experiencing morning sickness, not just in the morning but throughout the day. She vomits frequently. The smell of vomit is present in the room, acidic, sharp. The smell of partially digested food mixed with stomach acid. Vomit is cleaned up, but the smell lingers. It soaks into fabrics, the carpets, the upholstered furniture, her clothes if she doesn't get to a basin in time. The smell of old vomit is particularly foul. It is the smell of decomposing food mixed with stomach acid, a combination that is intensely unpleasant. Pregnancy also increases body odour. Marie Antoinette is producing more sweat due to hormonal changes. The sweat has a different quality from non-pregnant sweat. It is affected by pregnancy hormones, creating a distinctive smell. She is also producing more vaginal discharge. Pregnancy increases discharge. The discharge soaks into her undergarments, creating a smell of vaginal secretions, mixed with the general smell of unwashed genital area. Her breasts are swollen and tender in preparation for lactation. They produce small amounts of colostrum, pre-milk fluid that leaks from her nipples. The colostrum stains her shift, creating a sour milk smell mixed with body odour. This smell will become much more intense after the baby is born and she begins producing actual milk. Now she won't nurse long before handing the baby to a wet nurse. Pregnancy makes her gassy. Hormones slow digestion, causing bloating and increased flatulence. She farts frequently, can't help it. It is a pregnancy symptom. In the enclosed, poorly ventilated bedchamber, her gas adds to the general smell. Farts linger in the air, adding sulphurous notes to the overall odour profile of the room. Her ladies in waiting attend her through all of this. They clean up her vomit. They help her change clothes when they're soiled. They empty chamber pots that contain not just urine, but also vomit when she doesn't make it to the proper basin. They're intimately familiar with the smells of the Queen's pregnant body. The vomit, the increased body odour, the discharge, the gas. This is their job. They attend to her body and all its outputs without complaint, according to research by Dr. Antonia Fraser in her biography of Marie Antoinette. The Queen's pregnancies were attended by numerous courtiers. Privacy during pregnancy and childbirth was minimal for royalty. When she gave birth, dozens of people crowded into the room to witness, creating a hot, crowded, foul-smelling environment for labour and delivery. Marie Antoinette nearly died during one birth partly because the room was so crowded and airless that she couldn't breathe properly. The smell and heat of dozens of unwashed bodies in an enclosed space during labour created dangerous conditions. Let's travel forward in time to the bedchamber of Queen Victoria at Windsor Castle. Around 1870, Victoria is 51 years old, has been queen for over 30 years, and is a widow. Prince Albert died in 1861. Her bedchamber reflects her widowhood and her personality. Dark, heavy Victorian furniture, elaborate but sombre decorations, and it smells distinctly different from earlier queens' chambers. Better in some ways, worse in others. The most noticeable difference from earlier periods is that Victoria bathes more frequently, perhaps weekly or even more often. Indoor plumbing is being installed in royal palaces. Hot running water is available. The Victorian era is seeing major advances in sanitation, so Victoria's body odour is less intense than Elizabeth's or Marie Antoinette's. But less intense doesn't mean absent. She still has body odour. A week of sweat accumulation still smells. But it is the smell of a body that has been washed within the past week rather than within the past month. However, Victoria has specific smells related to her age and her widowhood. She is postmenopausal, which changes her body chemistry. Postmenopausal women produce different sweat. It is affected by changed hormone levels. The smell is sharper, sometimes more pungent. Victoria also has age-related health issues. She is overweight, has poor circulation, likely has some degree of incontinence. She leaks small amounts of urine, which soaks into her undergarments and creates an ammonia smell. She is wearing widow's black. She has been in mourning for Albert for 9 years and will continue mourning for the remaining 40 years of her life. Black wool absorbs odours just like any fabric. Her black dresses smell of body odour, perhaps even more noticeably than lighter coloured fabrics would, because the black dye itself has a chemical smell that mixes with body odour. Victorian fashion is extremely restrictive. Victoria wears corsets that compress her abdomen and internal organs. The compression affects digestion. She has chronic indigestion and gas. She farts and burps frequently, though these are never mentioned in polite company. The gas has a sulphurous smell from the rich Victorian diet high in meat. When she is alone in her bedchamber, or with only her most intimate attendants, the smell of her digestive gas is noticeable in the enclosed space. Now notice the smell of the room itself. Victorian decor favours heavy fabrics, thick curtains, upholstered furniture covered in velvet or brocade, carpets. All these fabrics trap smells. They absorb body odours, food smells, smoke from fires and candles, and they hold onto these smells. The room has a musty smell of old fabric that has absorbed decades of various odours. Victoria's bedroom is kept warm. Fires burn even in moderate weather because she dislikes cold. The warmth intensifies smells. It also creates a stuffy atmosphere. Despite better understanding of ventilation in the Victorian era, the room still smells stale, too warm, too many fabrics absorbing smells, not enough fresh air circulation. The chamber pot is still in use, though Victoria also has access to water closets, early flush toilets installed in Windsor Castle. But at night, the convenience of a chamber pot next to the bed means it is still used. The pot is emptied promptly by servants, but the smell of urine still lingers in the room. The Victorian emphasis on concealing bodily functions means the chamber pot is hidden in a decorative cabinet or under the bed, but hiding it doesn't eliminate the smell. According to research by Dr. Anthony Clayton on Queen Victoria's household, even with Victorian improvements in sanitation, royal bedrooms still had significant odour issues. Victoria lived through the transition from pre-modern to modern sanitation, but for much of her life, the improvements were partial. She had running water but still used chamber pots. She bathed more often than her predecessors, but still by modern standards infrequently. Her life bridged two eras, and so did the smells of her private rooms. Let's examine Victoria's mourning practices and how they affect smell. After Albert's death, Victoria kept his room exactly as it was, his clothes, his personal items, everything preserved as if he might return. This extended to her own bedchamber. She had Albert's nightclothes laid out each night, had his clothes kept as they were. These clothes, unworn, slowly accumulated dust and developed a musty smell of fabric that is not being aired or cleaned, but just sitting in the same position for years. The obsessive preservation of Albert's things creates a mausoleum-like quality to her private rooms. Things are kept but not used. Rooms are maintained but not truly lived in. They're shrines. The smell is of stagnation, of things not moving or changing, of air that is thick with dust and memories and the slow decomposition of organic materials like fabric and leather. Victoria's own depression after Albert's death affects her personal hygiene. She is less careful about her appearance, less fastidious about changing clothes or maintaining herself. Depression often leads to neglecting personal care. Victoria's depressive episodes mean periods where she bathes less, changes clothes less often, pays less attention to her body's needs. During these periods, her body odour intensifies. Her ladies worry but can't force the Queen to bathe or change clothes. She eats for comfort rich Victorian foods in large quantities. This affects her body odour. The smell of heavy meat and dairy diet comes through in sweat. It also affects her digestive system. She has constant indigestion, bloating, and gas. The smell of her digestive troubles is present whenever she is in the enclosed space of her bedchamber. Now, let's examine the smell of Victoria's advancing age. By the 1880s and 1890s, she is in her 60s, 70s, eventually 80s. Her body is aging, and age has its own smells. Her skin is thinner, producing less oil, but what oil it does produce smells different. Old person, smell is a real phenomenon, caused by nunal, a compound produced when skin oils break down, which happens more as skin ages. She has poor circulation. Her feet and legs have reduced blood flow. This can cause changes in skin condition and smell. Feet with poor circulation can develop distinctive odours. Her shoes and stockings carry the smell of old person foot odour, a combination of age, related skin changes, and reduced ability to maintain foot hygiene. She likely has some degree of urinary and possibly fecal incontinence, common in elderly people. She wears extra padding in her undergarments to absorb leaks, but the smell of urine is present. Old urine absorbed into padding that can't be changed immediately creates a strong ammonia smell. It is the smell of many elderly people, urine, and the sweet, musty smell of aging skin. Her teeth, what remain of them, are in poor condition. Victorian dentistry is better than previous eras, but still primitive. Victoria has had dental work, has lost teeth, has remaining teeth that are decayed or damaged. Her breath smells of dental decay and old age. When she speaks, the smell of her mouth precedes her words. According to research by Dr. Margaret Homans at Yale University on Victoria's later years, the elderly Queen became increasingly reclusive and particular about who was allowed in her presence. Some of this was personality, but some might have been self-consciousness about her aging body and its smells. She was aware of being old, of her body declining, of the undignified realities of aging. She controlled access to her private spaces, including her bedchamber, limiting who could see and smell her in her most private moments. Now let's travel to a different type of Queen's bedroom, Catherine the Great of Russia, at the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg, around 1780. Catherine is 51 years old, has been Empress of Russia for 18 years, and her bedchamber has unique smells related to Russian climate and customs. The first thing you notice is cold. It is winter in St. Petersburg. The temperature outside is well below freezing. The palace is heated by enormous stoves in each room. Russian stoves, massive structures of ceramic or brick that burn wood and radiate heat. The stove smell is prominent. Wood smoke, very warm ceramic, the particular smell of a wood fire burning in an enclosed stove. It is not unpleasant, but it is very strong, permeating everything. Catherine's body odour is complicated by the cold climate and heavy clothing. She wears many layers, shifts, petticoats, heavy dresses, fur-lined robes. These layers trap body heat and also trap body odours. She sweats underneath all the layers. The rooms are overheated from the stoves. Even though outside is freezing, the sweat has nowhere to go, absorbed into multiple layers of fabric that are never washed. Russian nobility bathes somewhat more frequently than Western European nobility. Bathhouses are part of Russian culture. Catherine likely bathes weekly or even more often, using the palace's bathing facilities. But even with weekly bathing, body odour accumulates, and the heavy clothing makes the smell more intense. It is trapped close to her body by layers of fabric, only released when the clothes are removed. Now notice the smell of furs. Catherine wears furs, sable, ermine, bear, fox. These are luxury items demonstrating her wealth and status. They're also sources of smell. Fur, even when well prepared and cured, has an animal smell, the smell of whatever animal it came from. Sable has a musky smell. Bear fur has a stronger, wilder smell. Fox fur has a distinctive, sharp smell. The furs absorb Catherine's body odour. They also absorb perfumes. She uses perfumes liberally to mask body odour and to signal luxury. The combination of animal fur smell, human body odour, and heavy perfume creates a complex, distinctly Russian scent. Musky, rich, slightly wild, heavily perfumed. Catherine's sexuality adds another dimension to the smell of her bedroom. Catherine is known for having lovers, a series of favourites who share her bed. The bedroom smells of sex, sweat, semen, vaginal fluids, the distinctive smell of sexual activity. Bed sheets absorb these smells. The mattress absorbs them over time. The room has an underlying smell of sexuality that everyone knows about, but no one acknowledges directly. The lovers themselves bring their own smells into the room. Grigory Potemkin, one of Catherine's most famous favourites, was reportedly not particularly concerned with personal hygiene. He was a military man, smelled of horses and battlefields and male sweat. When he was in Catherine's bed, the room smelled of his body mixed with hers, a combination of female and male body odours, plus the smells of sex. According to research by historian Dr. Robert Massey on Catherine the Great, her personal life was relatively open for royalty. She didn't hide her lovers behind layers of secrecy, like some monarchs did. This meant her bedchamber was known as a space of sexuality as well as sleep. The smells of sex and lovers were part of the room's identity. Servants cleaning the room dealt with soiled sheets, with the smell of sexual activity, with evidence of Catherine's active sex life. Let's examine one more royal bedroom, this time going much earlier to the chamber of Eleanor of Aquitaine, Queen first of France and then of England, around 1170. Eleanor is staying at one of the royal residences in England, perhaps Winchester or Westminster. The bedchamber is medieval cold stone walls, small windows, tapestries for warmth, and it smells like the 12th century. The overwhelming smell is smoke. The room is heated by an open fire, either a central hearth or a fireplace in the wall. Wood smoke fills the room. There is no chimney or only a primitive chimney. So much of the smoke stays in the room, creating a hazy atmosphere. Everything smells of smoke. The tapestries, the bedding, Eleanor's clothes, her hair. The smoke smell is so pervasive that you stop noticing it after a while, but it is always there, coating the back of your throat. Eleanor's body odor is significant. She bathes rarely, perhaps a few times a year. The effort required to heat enough water for a bath is enormous. Most of the time, she just wears her unwashed shift and hopes the linen absorbs enough body soil to keep her relatively clean. It doesn't work. She smells of months of accumulated body odor, sweat, skin oils, and the secretions of a body that is never properly washed. She is 48 years old in 1170, has borne 10 children, 8 survived infancy. Her body shows the effects of repeated pregnancy and childbirth. She is likely postmenopausal, or approaching it, which changes her hormones and her body odor. She might have some degree of urinary incontinence from multiple childbirths stretching her pelvic floor. Small amounts of leaked urine add to her body's smell profile. Medieval fashion means layers of wool and linen. Wool is warm but absorbs body odor intensely. Eleanor's wool dresses smell of her body. The wool has absorbed years of sweat and is never washed. Washing wool is difficult and can ruin the fabric. The smell of unwashed wool mixed with human body odor is one of the defining smells of medieval life. The room smells of mildew and damp. Stone walls in English climate are always slightly damp. Tapestries hung on walls absorb moisture. Bedding gets damp from body sweat and from the general humidity. Damp organic materials, wool, linen, straw mattress filling, develop mildew. The smell is musty, earthy. The smell of things slowly rotting in damp conditions. The floor is covered with rushes, dried grass and herbs. The rushes are supposed to be changed regularly, but in practice they accumulate layers of filth, dropped food, spilled wine, mud tracked in from outside, dog feces. Eleanor keeps hunting dogs that aren't house-trained. Sometimes human urine if someone couldn't make it to the chamber pot in time. The bottom layers of rushes are compressed, damp, rotting, creating a foul smell from the floor. According to research by historian Dr. Amy Kelly on Eleanor of Aquitaine, medieval royal residences were far less comfortable than later palaces. They were cold, drafty, often damp and smelly. Queens like Eleanor travelled constantly between residences, partly because staying in one place too long allowed filth to accumulate to unbearable levels. Moving to a different residence meant temporarily leaving behind the accumulated smells and filth of the previous location. Eleanor's bedchamber contains a medieval bed, a wooden frame with ropes, supporting a mattress stuffed with straw or feathers. The mattress filling gradually compresses and develops a musty smell. The sheets are linen, changed perhaps weekly if Eleanor is fastidious. But a week of sleeping means the sheets are saturated with sweat and body oils. The smell of slept-in linen is noticeable every time she gets into bed. The bed has curtains for warmth and privacy. These curtains, like all fabric in the room, absorb smells, smoke from the fire, body odours, breath, farts. When the curtains are drawn closed at night, Eleanor is in an enclosed space with all these smells concentrated. The air inside the curtained bed is stuffy, warm from her body heat, and full of the concentrated smells of her unwashed body and the unwashed bedding. She uses perfumes when she can get them: rose water, lavender, imported scents from the East. Eleanor has been on crusade, has travelled to the Holy Land, and brings back Eastern perfumes. These are luxuries, expensive and precious. She uses them to mask her body odour, but medieval perfumes are not as refined as later ones. They're strong, often with harsh overtones that don't fully mask body odour, so much as create a different combination of smells: flowers plus sweat, plus the musky base notes of medieval perfumes made from animal products. Now let's reflect on the cumulative experience across all these royal bedrooms. From Eleanor of Aquitaine in the 1100s to Queen Victoria in the late 1800s. We see evolution, but also continuity. The basic problems remain the same: inadequate bathing, clothes that can't be washed, chamber pots, poor ventilation, and the accumulation of body odours that couldn't be eliminated. The queens have power, wealth, and status, They command armies, make political decisions, shape history, but they can't escape the smells of their own bodies. They sleep in rooms that smell of unwashed flesh, chamber pot waste, old fabric, and the accumulated funk of daily life without modern sanitation. They're ladies in waiting, they're servants, they're intimate attendants. All these people are intimately familiar with the smells of the Queen's body. They handle her waist, her bloodied menstrual cloths, her soiled undergarments. They apply makeup to her sweaty face, arrange her greasy hair, help her into clothes that smell of previous wearing. This intimate knowledge of the Queen's bodily reality is part of their service. The contrast between public image and private reality is stark. In public, queens appear magnificent, elaborate gowns, jewels, makeup creating an image of perfection. But in the private bedchamber, the magnificent queen becomes just a woman with a body that sweats, bleeds, defecates, produces odours. The smells of the bedchamber reveal the human reality under the royal image. According to research synthesizing palace life across centuries by historian Dr. Linda Levy-Peck, the private spaces of royalty were often surprisingly uncomfortable and unhygienic. Despite public magnificence, money could buy elaborate decoration but couldn't buy cleanliness in eras without modern sanitation technology. Queens lived with smells that would drive modern people out of the room within minutes. They breathed air thick with body odour, chamber pot waste, and various other smells. They accepted this as normal because everyone lived with similar smells. Royalty and peasants alike lived in a world where human funk was just the baseline reality. Let's examine more specific scenarios that reveal the true smell of royal bedchambers. You are a new lady in waiting to Queen Anne of England, your first day of service, spring of 1710. You've been told you'll attend the Queen in her bedchamber. You are nervous excited. This is a great honour. No one has prepared you for the smell. You enter the Queen's bedchamber at Kensington Palace. The smell hits you so hard you actually step backward. Your hand goes to your mouth involuntarily. You see another lady in waiting notice your reaction and give you a warning look. You must not react, must not show disgust. But how can you not react? The smell is overwhelming. Queen Anne is 45 years old, morbidly obese, suffering from gout, possibly lupus, definitely from the effects of 17 pregnancies. None of her children survived to adulthood. Her body is failing in multiple ways, and each failure has its own smell. The smell of infected flesh is prominent. Anne has gout so severe that her feet and legs are swollen, inflamed, sometimes with open sores. The sores weep fluid pus and serous discharge. The fluid soaks into her stockings, creating a smell of infection sweet and rotten at the same time. When her shoes and stockings are removed, you might be the one removing them, holding your breath, fighting not to gag. The smell intensifies. Her feet are swollen masses of inflamed tissue, open sores, dried pus, and the particular smell of flesh that is being destroyed by disease. The sores on her feet and legs sometimes become gangrenous. Gangrene has a distinctive smell, the smell of dead tissue, of flesh literally dying while still attached to a living body. It is sweet and putrid, a smell that makes you think of death, of corpses, of meat that is gone bad. This is the smell of the Queen's legs, and she lives with it constantly. Everyone who attends her lives with it. You learn to breathe through your mouth. Anne's obesity creates its own smell problems. She has rolls of fat where skin folds onto itself, under her breasts, in her abdomen, possibly in her thighs and arms. In these skin folds, sweat and dead skin cells accumulate. The folds are warm and moist, perfect environments for bacteria and fungi to grow. The smell from these skin folds is sharply sour. The smell of bacteria metabolizing trapped sweat and dead skin. It is the smell of flesh that never gets clean because it is hidden in folds that are difficult to access and impossible to keep dry. She likely has yeast infections in these skin folds. Yeast has a distinctive smell, slightly sweet, fermented like bread dough but gone wrong. The combination of bacterial and fungal growth in her skin folds creates a complex smell of unwashed body plus active infection. When you help her dress and undress, you get close to these infected skin folds. The smell is concentrated, inescapable. Anne has urinary incontinence. 17 pregnancies and childbirths have destroyed her pelvic floor. She leaks urine constantly. She wears thick padding in her undergarments, but the padding becomes saturated. Wet padding creates the perfect environment for bacterial growth. The smell is strong ammonia from decomposing urine, plus the smell of bacteria growing in the warm, wet environment. Her undergarments smell so strongly of urine that you can smell them across the room when they're being changed. She also has limited mobility due to gout and obesity. She can't easily move to use the close stool. Sometimes she doesn't make it in time. Sometimes she urinates or defecates in her bed or chair because she can't reach the close stool quickly enough. The servants clean it up, but the smell lingers. Furniture absorbs urine and fecal matter. No amount of cleaning fully removes the smell once it is soaked into upholstery. According to research by historian Dr. Edward Gregg on Queen Anne's health, her final years were characterized by almost complete physical collapse. She could barely walk, suffered terrible pain from gout, was incontinent, and likely had multiple infections. Her body was failing comprehensively, and all these medical problems had smell components. The sicker she became, the worse she smelled. Attendants had to maintain composure while dealing with a queen whose body was literally rotting in places while she still lived. Anne Stuart, Duchess of Hamilton, no relation to the Queen, kept a diary including an entry from 1714 describing a visit to Queen Anne. The diary, analysed by historian Dr. Francis Harris, mentions the closeness of the air in the Queen's chambers and notes that all who attend Her Majesty must possess strong constitutions. This is euphemistic language for the Queen's chambers smell terrible, and you need a strong stomach to endure it. The Duchess couldn't write directly about the Queen smelling bad. That would be treasonous. But the euphemism conveys the reality. Let's move to a different type of royal bedroom smell. The bedchamber of Empress Josephine, Napoleon's first wife, at Château de Malmaison near Paris, around 1805. Josephine's bedroom has unique smells related to her specific habits and the early 19th century environment. The overwhelming smell is flowers. Josephine is obsessed with flowers, particularly roses. The Château grounds contain extensive rose gardens, over 250 varieties during her time there. Fresh flowers are brought into her bedchamber daily. Vases of roses, lilies, jasmine, violets. The room is full of flowers. The smell is intensely floral, almost overwhelming in its sweetness. But flowers don't just smell pleasant. Cut flowers start to decay. The water in vases becomes stagnant, developing bacterial growth. The smell of flower water after a few days is foul, sweet, and rotten at the same time, like the flowers are decomposing in liquid. Servants are supposed to change the water daily, but sometimes they miss vases. The smell of rotting flower stems and stagnant water mixes with the pleasant smell of fresh flowers, creating a complex olfactory experience, beauty and decay existing simultaneously. Josephine uses enormous quantities of perfume. She favors musk, a heavy animal smell from musk deer glands. The musk is very strong, almost oppressive in its intensity. She also uses violet perfume, rose attar, and various other scents. She layers perfumes, applying multiple scents at once. The result is an overwhelming artificial smell. Too much perfume trying too hard to create an impression of luxury and femininity. According to historian Dr. Eleanor Delorme, Josephine's excessive use of perfume might have been compensating for something. Some historians speculate she had a medical condition, possibly vaginal fistula from gynecological damage, possibly chronic infections, that created body odor she was desperate to hide. The excessive perfume and obsession with flowers might have been attempts to mask an underlying smell she was ashamed of. Whether or not this speculation is correct, The reality is that her room smelled of artificial scent layered so thickly it became unpleasant. Now notice another smell animals. Josephine keeps pets in her bedroom. Small dogs sleep in her bed. Parrots and other exotic birds are caged in her rooms. The animals produce waste, dog feces and urine, bird droppings. These accumulate despite servants' efforts to clean. The smell of animal waste mixes with the flowers and perfume. It is an odd combination, luxury and squalor, beauty and excrement, existing in the same space. The dogs sleep in her bed, on her pillows. They shed hair, produce dander, have their own doggy smell. When you lie in a bed where dogs sleep, you smell like dog. Josephine's bedding, her nightclothes, her hair, all carry the smell of her dogs. It is not a terrible smell necessarily, but it is distinctly animal. The Queen of France technically, though, Napoleon was emperor by this point, smells like dog because she lets her pet sleep on her. Josephine is 42 years old in 1805, approaching menopause. Her body is producing the smells of a woman in hormonal transition, the sharper sweat smell of changing estrogen levels. She is also anxious. Napoleon is increasingly dissatisfied with her because she hasn't given him an heir. Her children are from her first marriage. Stress and anxiety affect body odor. Stress sweat smells different from normal sweat, more acrid, sharper. Josephine's stress about her marriage, about aging, about losing Napoleon's affection. All this creates stress sweat that adds to her body's smell profile. She uses cosmetics, not the heavy lead-based makeup of earlier eras, but early 19th century cosmetics that are somewhat less toxic but still problematic. Rouge, powder, various creams and ointments. These products have their own smells, chemical, artificial, the smell of various oils and dyes. Applied over imperfectly clean skin, the cosmetics mix with body oils and sweat to create a greasy, slightly rancid smell. Her teeth are in poor condition. She has had dental problems for years. Her smile is reportedly closed, lipped because she is ashamed of her teeth. Bad teeth mean bad breath. The smell of her mouth undermines all the perfume and flowers. When she speaks, when she breathes, the smell of dental decay emerges from behind the facade of scent and beauty. According to research by biographer Dr. Andrea Stewart, Napoleon eventually divorced Josephine partly to marry a younger woman who could give him an heir, but before the divorce, their relationship declined, and Napoleon spent less time in Josephine's bed. Some historians speculate whether physical factors including smells contributed to his declining interest. Did her anxiety sweat, her aging body's changing smells, the overwhelming perfume that might have been masking something worse, contribute to Napoleon seeking younger women? It is impossible to know for certain, but smell affects attraction, and Josephine's desperate attempts to smell pleasant might have created an artificial, unpleasant smell that repelled rather than attracted. Let's examine the specific smell of royal childbirth. What a queen's bedchamber smelled like during and after giving birth. You are attending Queen Charlotte of England, wife of George III, during one of her many childbirths. She had 15 children between 1762 and 1783. It is 1770. She is giving birth to her 8th child at Buckingham House, latter Buckingham Palace. The smell of fear is present. Charlotte is frightened. She knows childbirth can kill. Many women die giving birth. Fear produces sweat, stress sweat that smells sharp and acrid. Charlotte is sweating heavily, and the sweat smells of fear. Labour progresses. Charlotte hasn't bathed recently. Women in labour aren't bathed. She is wearing her shift, but it is soon soaked with sweat and amniotic fluid. Amniotic fluid has a distinctive smell, not terrible, but distinctive, a slightly sweet organic smell of the fluid that has been cushioning the baby inside the uterus. When her water breaks, amniotic fluid soaks the bed, creating a wet spot that will sit there throughout labour, becoming progressively more rank as it is combined with sweat, blood, and other fluids. Labour is long, many hours. Charlotte is in pain, crying out, sometimes vomiting from the pain. Vomit has to be cleaned up, but the smell lingers. The room is hot. Fires are burning because the baby must be born into a warm room, according to medical belief of the time. The heat intensifies every smell. Sweat, amniotic fluid, vomit, fear, all concentrated in a hot, closed room. Charlotte defecates during labour. This is normal during the pushing stage as the baby's head presses on the rectum, but it is humiliating for her, and the smell of feces now joins all the other smells. Attendants clean it up, but in a room full of people, royal births are attended by numerous courtiers who witness to verify the birth. Everyone smells it. The Queen has shit herself in front of an audience. This is the reality of childbirth, even for royalty. Finally, the baby is born. Blood gushes out, lots of blood, the normal amount of birth blood, but it looks like an alarming amount. Blood soaks the bedding, pools under Charlotte, creates a smell of iron and meat. Fresh blood has a distinctive metallic smell. Large amounts of blood create an overwhelming smell. The room smells like a butcher shop, like slaughter, like meat and iron and life and death happening simultaneously. The placenta is delivered, the organ that has been feeding the baby inside the uterus. It is a mass of blood and tissue, liver-like in appearance. It has a distinctive smell, very organic, very internal. Organs, the smell of something that should be inside a body, but is now outside. The placenta is examined to make sure it is intact and then removed, but the smell lingers. Charlotte is bleeding heavily after the birth. Postpartum hemorrhage is not uncommon. Blood continues to flow. The bedding is saturated. The room smells overwhelmingly of blood. For women attending who have never experienced childbirth, the smell is shocking. How can one woman produce this much blood and survive? Charlotte does survive this birth and 14 others, but the smell of birth blood is the smell of potential death, of how close every woman comes to dying when giving birth. According to research by historian Dr. Stella Tilliard on the Georgian royal family, Queen Charlotte's many childbirths were attended by numerous courtiers and officials. Privacy during royal birth was minimal. The king, court officials, and various nobility crowded into the birthing room to witness. All these people were subjected to the smells of labour: sweat, vomit, feces, blood, amniotic fluid. Royal birth was a public spectacle, and that included the smells. Charlotte had to endure not just the physical ordeal of childbirth, but the humiliation of producing all these smells in front of an audience who would remember and likely gossip about every detail. Let's examine the smell of a queen dying, what the deathbed chamber smelled like. You are attending Catherine Howard, fifth wife of Henry VIII, during her final hours in the Tower of London, February 1542. Catherine is 18 or 19 years old, about to be executed for adultery. She is spending her last night alive in a chamber in the Tower. The smell of fear is overwhelming. Catherine is terrified. She knows she'll die tomorrow, beheaded like Anne Boleyn before her. Fear produces strong body odour. Stress hormones affect sweat composition. Catherine is producing fear sweat, sharp, acrid, the smell of a body in extreme stress. She is sweating through her clothes despite the cold February air. She hasn't been allowed to bathe during her imprisonment. Prisoners, even royal ones, don't get bathing privileges. She has been wearing the same clothes for days or weeks, accumulating body odour. The smell of her unwashed body is sharp and noticeable in the small chamber where she is confined. She has been vomiting from fear and stress. The smell of vomit is in the room, acidic, sharp, the smell of stomach contents expelled. The vomit has been cleaned up, but the smell remains, especially in a cold stone room where smells linger. She has been having diarrhea. Fear and stress affect the digestive system. The close stool in her chamber has been used multiple times. The smell of diarrhea is different from normal feces, more liquid, more acidic, somehow more desperate. It is the smell of a body that is given up on normal function, that is just expelling everything in response to overwhelming stress. She likely hasn't been sleeping, facing execution tomorrow. How could she sleep? Days without sleep create their own smell. The body in extreme stress produces different sweat, different breath. Sleep deprivation affects body chemistry. Catherine smells like someone who has been awake for days in terror, whose body is at the breaking point. Her final morning arrives. She is helped to dress in her execution outfit. She has chosen black velvet, appropriate for death. But underneath the velvet, her body still smells of fear, of unwashed flesh, of a terrified teenager about to die. She walks to the scaffold carrying all the smells of her final imprisoned days. Fear, stress, unwashed body, the accumulated funk of imprisonment and terror. According to historian Dr. Retha Warnick's research on Catherine Howard's final days, she requested the execution block be brought to her chamber the night before her death, so she could practice laying her head on it, trying to prepare herself for the moment. The chamber where she spent her final night contained the execution block, the very object that would sever her head the next day, along with the smells of her terror. This is the ultimate smell of royalty stripped of dignity, a queen dying in fear, producing the smells of a body in extremity, unable to maintain any pretense of royal bearing. Let's look at the bedchamber of an ill Queen Mary II, dying of smallpox at Kensington Palace, December 1694. Mary is 32 years old, has been queen for 5 years, ruling jointly with her husband, William III, and is dying rapidly from smallpox. The smell of disease is overwhelming. Smallpox creates a distinctive smell, infected pustules covering every inch of skin, including inside the mouth and throat, including the genitals. The pustules fill with fluid, then with pus. When they rupture, which they do constantly, pus drains onto the skin, onto the bedding, creating a smell of infection, sweet and rotten, the smell of massive bacterial growth. Mary's body is covered in pustules. Her face is swollen beyond recognition. The pustules are so dense, they merge into sheets of infected tissue. Her eyes are swollen shut from pustules on her eyelids. Her mouth and throat are full of pustules, making swallowing agonizing. Pustules cover her genital area, her breasts, every inch of her body. She is essentially a mass of infected sores, and the smell is the concentrated smell of infection. Hundreds of pockets of pus, all draining simultaneously. The bedding is soaked with pustule drainage. Pus mixed with blood from ruptured pustules soaks into the sheets. The sheets are changed frequently, but within hours they're soaked again. The smell of pus-soaked bedding is nauseating, sweet, rotten, the smell of massive infection. Attendants have to breathe through cloths held over their faces, but even so, the smell penetrates. Mary is dying. As death approaches, her body begins to shut down. She is incontinent, urinating and defecating without control. She is vomiting. Her body is rejecting everything. The smell of death is approaching, a smell that is hard to describe but unmistakable, the smell of a body that is starting to die before it is completely dead. It is sweet and chemical, the smell of metabolism changing, organs failing, the beginning of decomposition, even while life remains. Her breath is terrible pustules in her mouth and throat, possible secondary infections in her lungs, the general smell of a dying body. When she breathes out, shallow, gasping breaths as she struggles for air, the smell is of decay, of rot, of death imminent. King William insists on being present despite the risk of infection. He holds Mary's hand, sits with her, breathes the same air full of smallpox contagion and the smell of her dying body. Attendants worry he'll contract smallpox from this close contact with her. He doesn't. He is apparently immune, having survived smallpox earlier, but he sits in the chamber that smells of disease and death, watching his wife die, surrounded by the olfactory evidence of her body's destruction. According to research by historian Dr. Tony Claydon on the reign of William and Mary, Mary's death from smallpox was traumatic for those who witnessed it. She declined rapidly, going from feeling slightly ill to dead within about 2 weeks. Those who attended her during her final days described the horror of watching a beautiful young queen become a mass of pustules, watching her suffer, smelling the disease consuming her body. The chamber where she died smelled so strongly of smallpox that it had to be thoroughly fumigated afterward, all fabrics burned, walls scrubbed, floors cleaned with vinegar, trying to eliminate the smell of death and disease. Let's examine seasonal variations in royal bedroom smells. Summer in a royal bedchamber. We've touched on this, but let's examine it more deeply. You are attending Queen Maria Theresa of Spain, wife of Louis XIV of France at Versailles during the summer of 1675. It is July. The temperature is in the high 80s Fahrenheit, around 30 plus Celsius. There is no air conditioning, no electric fans, no refrigeration. The heat transforms every smell. Body odor is intensified exponentially by heat. Maria Theresa's body produces sweat constantly in the heat. She is 36 years old, has had 6 pregnancies, 1 child survives, and her body produces the sweat of a reproductive age woman in a hot climate. The sweat soaks her many layers of clothing within hours. The layers trap the sweat, prevent evaporation, create pockets of warm moisture where bacteria multiply rapidly. The heat causes the sweat to decompose faster. Fresh sweat doesn't smell terrible, it is mostly odorless, but bacteria on the skin metabolize sweat, producing the smell of body odor. In heat, the bacteria work faster. Sweat that has been on skin for an hour in hot weather smells as bad as sweat that has been there for a day in cold weather. Maria Theresa's body odor reaches nauseating intensity within hours of her last partial cleaning. Her makeup runs in the heat. She wears white powder, lead-based rouge, various cosmetics. The heat causes her to sweat, and the sweat mixes with the makeup, creating a paste that runs down her face. The paste accumulates in the creases of her face, creating visible streaks. The smell is chemical and sweet, the smell of cosmetics mixed with sweat, creating a greasy, rancid smell. The room itself is stifling. No windows are opened. Bad air shouldn't be let in. The result is zero air circulation. The hot, humid air sits stagnant, accumulating smells. Body, odor, chamber pot waste, the smell of unwashed fabrics, food smells. Everything accumulates in the trapped air. By midday, the air is so thick with smell and heat that it is difficult to breathe. Flies are everywhere in summer. They're attracted to the smells, sweat, chamber pot waste, food scraps. They buzz around the room constantly. They land on the Queen's face, on food, on the chamber pot, then back to the Queen's face. They're vectors for disease and also just annoying and disgusting. The sound of flies buzzing mixes with the smells to create a complete sensory nightmare of summer in a royal bedroom. Food spoils rapidly in the heat. If Maria Theresa eats in her bedchamber, the food begins to spoil almost immediately. Meat goes bad, dairy products curdle, the smell of spoiling food joins all the other smells. Sometimes food is left uneaten plates sitting on furniture, food decomposing, attracting more flies. The smell of rotting food in hot weather is particularly foul-sharp, acidic, the smell of accelerated decay. According to research by historian Dr. Mathuda Vinha on daily life at Versailles, summer was the worst season for smell at the palace. The heat intensified all sanitation problems. The Seine River, which served as Versailles' water source, and also received its sewage downstream, became particularly foul in summer. The smell of sewage from inadequate systems permeated the palace. In hot weather, it was unbearable. Louis XI and the court often left Versailles in summer, travelling to other palaces partly to escape the stench of summer at Versailles. Now, winter, you were in the bedchamber of Queen Isabella I of Castile, in one of the royal residences in Spain, January 1500. Isabella is 48 years old, one of the most powerful monarchs in Europe. and she is freezing in her bedchamber. The smell of smoke is overwhelming. The room is heated by a brazier, a portable charcoal burner. Charcoal smoke fills the room, creating a hazy atmosphere. The smoke is acrid, harsh on the throat and lungs. Everything smells of smoke: Isabella's clothes, her hair, the bedding, the room itself. The smoke is a permanent presence, coating everything with a thin layer of soot and the pervasive smell of burning charcoal. The closed windows, kept shut to preserve heat, mean no ventilation. The smoke has nowhere to go. Neither does any other smell. All the usual smells, body odour, chamber pot, unwashed fabrics, are trapped in the sealed room along with the smoke. The combination is thick, almost choking. The air itself feels heavy. Isabella's body produces different smells in winter cold. Cold causes the body to conserve heat, affecting circulation. Her extremities, hands and feet, have reduced blood flow. This creates a distinctive smell of cold flesh, of body parts that aren't getting adequate circulation. There is also the smell of chilblains, painful swelling and lesions on extremities caused by cold. Chilblains can develop sores that weep fluid, adding a smell of mild infection to the general body smell. Her clothes are heavy wool and fur layers for warmth. These fabrics trap body odour even more than lighter fabrics. The wool, never washed, accumulates months of sweat and body odour. When warmed by the brazier or by her body heat, the wool releases its accumulated smell, a rich, funky smell of unwashed wool mixed with human secretions. It is the smell of meat and animal and human all together. The bedding smells of damp in cold weather. Moisture condenses, breath, body moisture, all create condensation that settles on cold surfaces. The bedding becomes damp. Damp fabric develops mildew. The smell is musty, earthy, the smell of organic material slowly rotting in cold, damp conditions. Isabella sleeps in bedding that smells of mildew every night, that feels slightly damp against her skin, that never fully dries before her body adds more moisture. According to research on Isabella I by historian Dr. Nancy Rubin, Isabella was known for her piety and her relatively simple lifestyle compared to other monarchs. But simple or not, she still lived in the same pre-modern conditions as everyone else. Her bedroom in winter was cold, smoky, damp, and smelly. Her power and accomplishments: she financed Columbus's voyage, completed the Reconquista, unified Spain, didn't protect her from the basic discomforts of medieval winter life. Let's examine the specific smell of royal sickness beyond smallpox, chronic illnesses that created ongoing smell problems in royal bedchambers. You are attending Princess Charlotte of Wales, daughter of George IV, during her final pregnancy. November 1817. Charlotte is 21 years old, pregnant with her first child, and something is terribly wrong. The labour is obstructed. The baby has been stuck for days. Charlotte has been in agonising labour for over 50 hours. Her body is releasing the smells of extreme physical stress and impending disaster. She is sweating profusely from pain and exertion. The sweat smells of stress, hormones of a body pushed beyond its limits. The smell is sharp, acrid, the smell of suffering. She has been vomiting repeatedly from the pain and from whatever is going wrong internally. The smell of vomit fills the room, acidic, bitter, the smell of a stomach that has been emptied multiple times until there is nothing left but bile. The bile vomit has a particularly foul smell, bright yellow-green, intensely bitter, the smell of digestive juices, without any food to digest. Her vagina is being torn by the obstructed labour. The baby's head has been pressing against her vaginal tissues for so long that the tissues are dying from lack of blood flow. The dying tissue creates a smell, the beginnings of necrosis, tissue decomposing while still part of a living body. It is a sweet, rotten smell, faint at first but building as more tissue dies. She is urinating and defecating involuntarily. Her body has no control left. Everything is focused on the impossible task of delivering a baby that won't move. Urine and feces are mixed with blood and amniotic fluid on the bedding. The smell is overwhelming. All the bodily fluids combined, soaking into fabric, creating a smell of human waste and birth fluids and blood all together. The baby is finally delivered stillborn, dead from the prolonged obstructed labour. The baby's body has been dying inside her, starting to decompose. When the baby emerges, the smell is terrible, the smell of death, of a body that has been dead for hours inside the birth canal. It is sweet and putrid, unmistakable. This dead baby has been inside Charlotte, and that smell has been part of what has been emerging from her body. Charlotte seems stable immediately after birth, but then suddenly declines. She is hemorrhaging internally, bleeding into her abdomen from ruptured blood vessels. The internal bleeding can't be seen, but her body is filling with blood that has nowhere to go. She complains of terrible abdominal pain. She becomes pale, cold, clammy. She is dying. Her attendants can smell death approaching. It is not something easily described, but people who've been around death recognize it. A smell that is slightly sweet, slightly chemical, the smell of metabolism changing as the body shuts down. Charlotte's breath changes, her skin produces a different smell. Her body releases odours that signal the approach of death. She dies 6 hours after giving birth, hemorrhaging internally, her abdomen full of blood, her body destroyed by the catastrophic labour. The room smells of death, of blood, of birth gone horribly wrong. Attendants break down sobbing. The heir to the British throne is dead, along with her baby, and they've witnessed it all, smelled every horrible moment. According to research by historian Dr. Thea Home on Princess Charlotte's death, the doctors who attended her were later heavily criticised. The labour was mismanaged. Modern medical understanding suggests intervention should have happened much earlier. Charlotte died from hemorrhage that might have been preventable. But at the time, all anyone could do was watch, wait, and breathe the smells of a body destroying itself in the process of trying to give birth. The bedroom where Charlotte died was later described as having an atmosphere of death that took days to dissipate despite cleaning and airing. Let's examine the smell of madness, what it smelled like in the rooms where queens or princesses were confined during mental illness. You are entering the apartments where Queen Maria I of Portugal is confined at the Royal Palace of Queluz, 1805. Maria is 70 years old, has been queen for over 40 years, and has been severely mentally ill for the past decade, possibly suffering from what we'd now recognise as severe depression, or bipolar disorder, or schizophrenia. The smell of neglect is immediate. Maria refuses to bathe, refuses to change clothes, resists attempts at personal care. She has been wearing the same clothes for weeks or months. The smell of unwashed body is intense. Months of sweat, body oils, dead skin cells, all accumulated in fabric that is never washed. It is a thick, rancid smell, the smell of profound personal neglect. She is incontinent, possibly from age, possibly from her mental state, making her unaware of bodily functions. She urinates and defecates in her clothes, in her bed, wherever she happens to be when the urge comes. Attendants clean her when they can, but she fights them, screaming and violent. Often she is left soiled because attempting to clean her is too difficult. The smell of urine and feces is constant, strong enough to be detected from outside her apartments. The rooms smell of decay and stagnation. The curtains are kept drawn. Maria can't tolerate light. Food is brought but often not eaten. Plates of rotting food sit on furniture, attracting flies and creating foul smells. The air is stale, never refreshed, thick with the accumulated smells of human waste, rotting food, unwashed body, and mental anguish. Maria screams, frequently howling, incoherent screaming that echoes through the palace. When she screams, attendants smell her breath, terrible breath from rotting teeth. She won't allow dental care, and from stomach problems, she doesn't eat properly. The breath of madness smells like death and decay. She has delusions. She believes her dead husband and children are visiting her. She talks to people who aren't there, During these episodes, she becomes agitated, sweating heavily. The sweat of psychosis smells different. It is stress, sweat plus something else, something chemical that comes from a brain that is misfiring. It is the smell of a body in mental crisis. According to research by historian Dr. Kenneth Maxwell on the Portuguese monarchy, Maria I's descent into madness was traumatic for everyone around her. She had been an effective ruler, but a series of tragedies, deaths of her husband, son, and daughter within short succession, broke her mental health. For the last 16 years of her life, she was essentially imprisoned in her apartments, living in conditions of profound physical and mental deterioration. Those who attended her described the horror of watching a queen become a mad old woman living in her own waste, smelling of decay while still alive. Let's examine the contrast between public and private smells. What happened when queens transitioned from public appearances to private chambers? You are observing Queen Elizabeth I in 1600, near the end of her life. In public, she is still the gloss. Iana, the Virgin Queen, elaborately dressed and made up. She processes through public rooms, and courtiers smell her approach. The overwhelming perfume, the scent of rosewater and musk and civet that announces her presence before she is visible. But follow her back to her private chambers, the doors close, the public facade ends. Ladies in waiting help her undress. Each layer of magnificent clothing removed reveals the reality underneath. The sweat-soaked shift that smells of body odour. The body itself, 67 years old, scarred from smallpox, producing the smells of an aging, unwashed body. The wig removed, revealing thin, greasy hair on a scarred scalp that smells of sebum and old age. The makeup is partially removed, smearing away some of the lead-white serous, revealing the damaged skin underneath. But the makeup is never fully removed, so layers of old makeup remain, mixed with sweat and skin oils, creating a smell of cosmetics gone rancid. The smell of her face at night, with makeup smeared and partially removed, is worse than the smell of her face during the day when fresh makeup covers old. Her teeth, or what remains of them, become more noticeable without the distraction of her magnificent appearance. When she is just an old woman in a shift, rather than the glorious queen, the smell of her rotting mouth becomes the dominant impression. She speaks to her ladies, and they smell death on her breath. She gets into bed. The bed smells of previous night's sleep, sheets that have absorbed sweat, body odours, possibly urine if she has had incontinence episodes, common in elderly people. The pillow smell of her hair, of her breath, of decades of use without proper cleaning. She lies down in this bed that smells like her, pulls the curtains closed, seals herself in with all her smells, and tries to sleep. According to research by historian Dr. Susan Doran on Elizabeth I's later years, the aging queen became increasingly isolated and melancholic. She refused to look in mirrors, didn't want to see her aged face. She insisted on wearing elaborate makeup and costumes, even in private. But no amount of costume could hide the physical reality of a 67-year-old body that had never been properly clean, that had teeth rotting in the mouth, that produced all the smells of advanced age. The public image and private reality were completely opposed. Magnificent facade, squalid reality. Let's examine the smell of royal death and what happened to bedchambers after a queen died in them. You are a servant tasked with cleaning Queen Anne's bedchamber after her death in August 1714. Anne died in her bed at Kensington Palace, her body ravaged by gout, obesity, and general physical collapse. Now, you must clean the room where she died. The smell of death is overwhelming. Anne's body released fluids after death, urine and feces expelled as muscles relaxed. These fluids soaked into the bedding where her body lay. The smell of human waste mixed with the smell of death itself, that distinctive sweet chemical smell of a body beginning to decompose. Even though her body has been removed, the smell remains. The bed linens are soaked with death fluids, urine, feces, sweat from her final hours, possibly vomit if she vomited as she died. The mattress itself is saturated. No amount of washing will make these usable again. They must be burned. The only way to eliminate the smell of death from fabric that has absorbed it so thoroughly. The room has the accumulated smell of Anne's final illness. Weeks or months of infected sores, incontinence, the smell of a body failing comprehensively. The smells have soaked into the wallpaper, the upholstered furniture, the carpets. You scrub the floor with vinegar and lye. You burn aromatic herbs to try to mask the smell. But death has marked this room. Everyone who enters will smell it for months. The curtains must be taken down and burned. The upholstered furniture must be removed. Even the wallpaper might need to be stripped and replaced. Death doesn't just smell in the moment. It lingers, soaking into porous materials, creating an olfactory memory that can't be easily eliminated. The room where a queen died becomes a room that smells like death. And it takes enormous effort and expense to make it habitable again. According to research on death customs by historian Dr. Claire Gittings, bedchambers where royalty died were often sealed and left unused for extended periods. Partly this was respect for the dead, but partly it was practical. The room smelled terrible, and no one wanted to use it. Some rooms were eventually converted to other uses or completely redecorated to try to eliminate the association with death. The smell of death was so powerful that it could make a room unusable, even in a palace full of other foul-smelling rooms. Let's examine the specific smells of different cosmetics and preparations used by queens. We've discussed makeup generally, but let's get detailed. You are helping Marie Antoinette apply her morning cosmetics at Versailles, 1780s. Each product has its own smell, and they layer together to create Marie Antoinette's distinctive scent. First, the base pomade de Seville, a greasy pomade applied all over her face. It is made from beef marrow, almond oil, and spermaceti, waxy substance from whale heads. The beef marrow gives it an animal smell, not terrible but definitely organic, fleshy. The smell of applying animal fat to human skin creates a combination that is vaguely meat-like. This base is supposed to protect her skin, but it is essentially smearing her face with animal products that will sit on her skin all day, going rancid in the heat. Next, Blanc de Sakura's white lead powder to lighten her complexion. This is mixed with water or vinegar to form a paste. The vinegar gives it a sharp, acidic smell. The lead itself has a faint metallic smell. Applied thickly over the pomade, it creates a greasy paste that smells chemical and sharp. This paste will crack during the day as her facial muscles move, revealing the reddish skin underneath, requiring reapplication. Rouge for her cheeks, carmine made from crushed cochineal insects. The insect-based pigment has a faintly metallic sweet smell. It is mixed with beef tallow or other fats to make it spreadable. More animal products, more organic smells of bugs, and beef fat mixed together and applied to her face. Belladonna drops for her eyes juice from the deadly nightshade plant, toxic alkaloids that dilate her pupils to make her eyes look large and luminous. Belladonna has a slightly bitter herbal smell. It is poison being dripped into her eyes, and everyone can smell the herbal bitter scent as it is applied. The drops blur her vision and make her eyes water, smearing her other makeup. Perfume applied in quantity, rose water, musk, civet, ambergris. Each perfume has its own strong smell. Rose water is floral but very concentrated, almost cloying. Musk smells animalistic, musky, with faintly fecal undertones. It comes from musk deer scent glands. Civet smells similar from cat anal gland secretions. Musky, animal, slightly fecal. Ambergris, from whale intestines, smells sweet and marine. These are layered on top of each other and on top of the cosmetics, creating a thick, artificial smell that is overwhelming. Hair, powder, wheat, flour, or potato starch mixed with various scents. The powder itself smells like flour, slightly yeasty. Scents might be added: violet, lavender, orris root. The powder is applied liberally to her elaborate hairstyle. creating clouds of scented flower that settle on her hair, her skin, her clothes. The powder mixes with the cosmetics on her face, with her sweat, creating a paste that smells like scented dough. According to research by historian Dr. Caroline Weber, Marie Antoinette's elaborate beauty rituals took hours each morning and used dozens of products. Each product had strong smells. Applied in layers, the combined smell was intensely artificial, the smell of someone trying very hard to not smell like a human body. The effort to mask natural human smell with animal products, toxic chemicals, and strong perfumes created an artificiality that was its own kind of assault on the senses. Marie Antoinette didn't smell like a person. She smelled like a complicated mixture of cosmetics, none of which quite worked the way they were supposed to. Let's examine the smell of royal fabric care, what the process of maintaining clothes without washing them smelled like. You are working in the wardrobe department at Versailles, responsible for maintaining the Queen's clothes. The clothes can't be washed. They're made of silk, velvet, brocade, materials that would be destroyed by water. So how do you clean them? You don't really. You try to mask the smell and deal with visible stains. The clothes smell overwhelmingly of body odor, sweat that is soaked into silk and velvet, body oils that have been absorbed into fabric over multiple wearings. Silk that is absorbed sweat has a particular smell, slightly sweet, definitely organic. The smell of human secretions mixed with expensive fabric. It is an odd combination, luxury and filth. You brush the clothes to remove visible dirt and dead skin cells. The brush releases clouds of dust and skin cells into the air. You breathe in particles of the Queen's dead skin, her sweat residue, tiny fragments of her body. The smell of brushing clothes is musty, slightly organic. The smell of accumulated human debris being stirred up. You apply orris root powder to try to absorb oils and mask smells. Orris root from iris flowers has a sweet floral, slightly violet smell. The powder is rubbed into the fabric, especially in areas of heavy soiling, underarms, collar, anywhere that touches skin directly. The orris root absorbs some oils, but mostly just adds a floral smell on top of body odor. The result is sweet flower, smell mixed with human funk. Not pleasant, just different. For serious stains, you use various treatments. Wine stains might be treated with white wine or milk. Grease stains with chalk or fuller's earth. Blood stains with cold water and lemon juice. Each treatment has its own smell. The sour smell of wine, the sour smell of milk going bad, the sharp smell of lemon juice. The treatments often don't fully remove stains, just fade them. The fabric remains marked by all its previous wearings, faint brown stains from sweat, pale pink, stains from blood, possibly menstrual blood that leak through undergarments, yellowish stains from various body secretions. You hang the clothes to air out, exposing them to fresh air in hopes that some of the smell will dissipate. This helps marginally. The outer smells, perfume, powder, do fade with airing, but the deep in the fabric smells of body odor remain. The clothes might smell slightly less intense after airing, but they never smell clean. They always carry the smell of previous wearings, of the body that wore them. According to research by costume historian Dr. Linda Baumgarten on historical garment care, the inability to properly clean clothes meant they had limited lifespans. Eventually, clothes became so saturated with body odor and stains that even the most expensive silk gowns had to be discarded. Queens might wear an elaborate gown a dozen times, then have it cut up for fabric to reuse in other garments because the original gown smelled too terrible to wear anymore. The fabric was valuable, but it was also ultimately disposable. Once it absorbed too much human body, it couldn't be salvaged. Let's examine one final aspect, the smell of royal latrines and guard robes, built-in toilets in castle towers. You are at the Tower of London. Entering a small room built into the thickness of a castle wall, a guard robe where royal prisoners would have relieved themselves. The guard robe is essentially a stone seat with a hole. The hole drops straight down the castle wall, either to the moat below or to a cesspit at the base of the wall. Waste falls through the hole and accumulates below. The smell is concentrated waste, decades or centuries of human feces and urine falling through this chute, some sticking to the walls of the chute, some decomposing at the bottom. The smell rises up through the hole. It is ammonia from decomposing urine, sulfurous compounds from decomposing feces, methane gas from anaerobic decomposition, all mixed together into a smell that is physically overwhelming. Your eyes water, you gag. This is what passing royalty sat over to defecate. The stone walls of the guard robe are stained brown and yellow from centuries of use. Urine has splashed on the stone. Feces have smeared on the edges. The stone is porous enough that it has absorbed waste materials, making the smell permanent. No amount of scrubbing will eliminate it. The walls themselves smell like a sewer. In winter, the stone is freezing cold, sitting on a frozen stone seat with a howling draft coming up from below, trying to defecate while freezing. This is the reality of royal toilet facilities. The cold at least reduces the smell slightly. In summer, the heat intensifies the smell to unbearable level. The guard robe in summer is almost unusable. The stench is so overwhelming that people hold their breath while using it, do their business as quickly as possible, and flee. Royal guard robes at castles like the Tower of London are still identifiable today. You can visit castle ruins and find the small rooms built into walls, with the distinctive hole and chute. Even centuries later, some still smell faintly of their original purpose. The stone absorbed centuries of waste, and the smell lingers faintly even after hundreds of years of disuse. According to research by historian Dr. Malcolm Thick on historical sanitation, guard robes were considered luxuries. Having a built-in toilet was a sign of wealth and status, but the reality was they were only marginally better than chamber pots. They eliminated the need to empty pots, but the smell was terrible, the cold was unbearable, and the risk of falling through the hole, especially for small children, was real. Queens and princesses used these facilities, sitting over holes that smelled like concentrated human waste, doing their business in conditions that were barely removed from the Middle Ages. Now let's reflect on the complete sensory experience of royal bedchambers throughout history. From Eleanor of Aquitaine in the 1100s to Queen Victoria in the 1800s, we see a persistent pattern. Power didn't eliminate smell. Wealth didn't create cleanliness. Royalty lived in rooms that smelled terrible by modern standards. The specific smells varied: smoke, body odor, chamber pots, decaying teeth, cosmetics gone rancid, disease, death. But the underlying reality was the same. Human bodies produce smells, and without modern sanitation and hygiene technology, those smells accumulate. They soak into fabrics that can't be washed. They permeate rooms that aren't properly ventilated. They create an olfactory environment that would drive modern people out within minutes, but that historical people accepted as normal. The queens themselves produced these smells. They couldn't escape their own biology. They also endured the smells of everyone around them, everyone who attended them in their most private spaces. The intimacy of smell is profound. Knowing exactly how someone smells is a kind of intimacy that goes beyond visual or auditory knowledge. The ladies in waiting who attended queens knew the exact smell of the queen's body, her breath, her menstrual blood, her chamber pot waste. This intimate smell knowledge was part of serving royalty. The contrast between public magnificence and private squalor reveals the fundamental limitation of pre-modern life. You could have gold furniture and silk hangings, but you still smelled like unwashed body. You could command armies, but you still produced chamber pot waste that smelled like everyone else's. Power couldn't buy exemption from biology. According to Research Synthesizing Sensory History by Dr. Mark M. Smith at the University of South Carolina, the past smelled dramatically different from the present. Modern people living in developed nations exist in an olfactory environment carefully managed to minimize natural smells. Deodorant, perfume, air fresheners, sewage systems, refrigeration all work to eliminate or mask the smells that humans and their activities produce. Historical people lived in the full reality of human smell. Nothing was masked, nothing was eliminated, everything accumulated. Royal bedchambers were concentrations of this reality. All the smells of a human life, trapped in enclosed spaces, soaking into expensive fabrics that couldn't be cleaned. Let's examine one more important aspect: the smell of pregnancy and postpartum in royal bedchambers. You are attending Queen Charlotte of Mecklenburg, Strelitz, wife of George III during her 6th pregnancy, 1770. Charlotte is 26 years old and will eventually have 15 children. Each pregnancy brings specific smells that transform the bedchamber. Morning sickness creates the smell of vomit. Charlotte experiences severe nausea throughout the first trimester. She vomits multiple times per Dalton Y, sometimes not making it to a basin in time. Vomit stains her clothes, soaks into bedding if she is sick during the night, splashes on the floor. The acidic smell of stomach contents is a constant presence in her rooms during early pregnancy. Servants clean it up, but the smell lingers in fabrics, in crevices of floorboards, in the general atmosphere of the room. Pregnancy increases vaginal discharge. This is normal, hormonal. But Charlotte has no modern understanding of this. The discharge soaks into her undergarments continuously. It has a distinctive smell, slightly sweet, organic, the smell of vaginal secretions in higher quantity than usual. Her shifts become stained with the discharge. The smell of pregnancy discharge is subtle but constant, mixing with her usual body odors to create a slightly different smell signature. Her breasts are swelling, preparing for lactation. They leak small amounts of colostrum, clear or yellowish pre-milk fluid. The colostrum stains her shift, creating dried, crusty patches on the fabric that smell faintly sour, like milk going bad. This is the smell of her body preparing to feed a baby. Months before the baby arrives. Pregnancy makes her sweat more. Hormonal changes increase perspiration. In the summer heat of London, Charlotte is constantly damp with sweat. The sweat has a different quality from non-pregnant sweat. Pregnancy hormones change its composition and smell. It is sharper, more pungent, the smell of a body working overtime to support a pregnancy. She is constipated. Pregnancy hormones slow digestion. When she finally defecates after days of constipation, the smell is intense, concentrated, more putrid than normal feces because it has been sitting in her bowel for so long. The chamber pot after she uses it smells terrible enough that servants grimace when emptying it. She is gassy. Pregnancy causes bloating and increased flatulence. Charlotte farts frequently, especially at night when alone in her bedchamber with only her most intimate ladies. The gas smells more intense than usual. Partially digested food sitting in her slow digestive system, fermenting, creating sulfurous gases that smell terrible when released. When the baby is finally born, Charlotte has relatively easy births compared to some queens. The postpartum period creates new smells. Lochia, the postpartum bleeding, lasts for weeks. Charlotte bleeds heavily, soaking multiple cloth pads per Dalton Yin. The lochia smells like menstrual blood but more intense. It is not just blood but also uterine tissue, mucus, the entire lining of the uterus being expelled. The smell is metallic and organic. The smell of inside, the body tissue becoming outside, the body waste. The bloodied cloths accumulate before being laundered. Even after laundering, they never get completely clean. The smell of old blood lingers in the fabric. Charlotte uses these same cloths for the next postpartum period and the next accumulating layers of blood. smell over multiple births. If Charlotte nurses the baby, she does, at least initially. Unlike some royal women who immediately hand babies to wet nurses, her breasts leak milk constantly. Milk soaks into her shift, dries, leaves crusty stains that smell sour. Breast milk that is dried into fabric has a distinctly sour-sweet smell, like spoiled dairy. Her shift smells like milk, and eventually like sour milk, as the leaking continues day after day. Her body is recovering from childbirth, stretched, torn, bleeding. If she had vaginal tears during birth, common with the rapid deliveries of multiple babies, these tears are healing. Healing wounds can smell, the smell of tissue repairing itself, of minor infections in the tears, of body fluids weeping from wounds. The smell is organic, slightly foul, the smell of a body recovering from trauma. According to research by historian Dr. Stella Tilliard on Georgian royal births, Charlotte's 15 pregnancies over 21 years meant she spent most of her 20s and 30s pregnant or postpartum. Her bedchamber smelled of pregnancy and birth for 2 decades. Vomit, breast milk, lochia, the various smells of fertile female body constantly cycling through pregnancy and recovery. This was considered normal for royal women. Producing heirs was the primary job, and the smells were just part of fulfilling that role. Let's examine the smell of royal old age more deeply. What happened to bedchambers as queens grew elderly? You are attending Queen Victoria in the final years of her life, around 1900. Victoria is 81 years old, overweight, has limited mobility, and her body is failing in the ways that elderly bodies fail. The smell of age is pervasive. Victoria's skin produces nunal, a compound created when skin oils break down, which increases with age. It creates the distinctive old person smell that is slightly sweet, slightly musty, unmistakable. Victoria's entire body produces this smell. Her bedchamber, her clothes, her furniture, everything smells of elderly skin secretions. She has limited mobility due to obesity and rheumatism. She can't move easily, which means she sits in the same positions for long periods. Areas where her body presses against furniture become sweaty, creating damp patches that never fully dry. These damp areas develop mildew, creating a musty smell that is part old person smell, part furniture, rot smell. She is incontinent. Urinary incontinence is almost universal in very elderly women. Victoria wears padding, but the padding becomes saturated. The smell of urine is constant in her presence. Old urine in padding, fresh urine when she leaks. The general ammonia smell that surrounds elderly incontinent people. Servants change her padding, but between changes she sits in her own urine, and the smell permeates everything. Her breath is terrible. She has few teeth left, and those remaining are decayed. Her gums are infected. She might have abscesses in her mouth, pockets of infection that create pus that smell of rot. When she speaks, and Victoria is notoriously outspoken, speaking her mind to the end, people smell her breath before they hear her words. It is the smell of decay, of a mouth that is failing. She has circulation problems. Her feet and legs have reduced blood flow. Poor circulation can cause tissue to develop strange smells. The smell of flesh that is not getting adequate oxygen, that is slowly degrading. Her feet might have sores that don't heal properly due to poor circulation. These sores weep fluid, become infected, smell of chronic wounds that won't heal. She eats rich Victorian foods, lots of meat and dairy, and her digestion is poor. Elderly digestive systems don't work as efficiently. She has chronic constipation, chronic gas, chronic indigestion. The smell of her gas is intense, partially digested rich food fermenting in her gut. When she is alone in her bedchamber and lets gas freely, the smell is overwhelming, sulphurous, meaty, the smell of food rotting inside a living body. Her bedchamber smells like accumulated old age. The furniture she has used for decades has absorbed decades of her body's smells. The mattress she sleeps on is saturated with years of sweat and body secretions. The chairs she sits in smell of her body. The entire room has an atmosphere of age and decay. Not unpleasant exactly, elderly people are used to it, but unmistakable. It is the smell of a body slowly shutting down, of systems failing, of life approaching its end. According to research by historian Dr. Michaela Reed on Victoria's later years, the elderly queen became increasingly demanding and difficult. She insisted on maintaining her routines despite physical limitations. She refused to acknowledge her body's failures, the incontinence, the limited mobility, the general decline. Servants attended to the messy reality of her aging body, while Victoria maintained the fiction of royal dignity. The contrast between the dignified queen and the smell of her failing body was stark. She was still powerful, still making decisions that affected the empire, but she was doing it from a body that smelled of age, urine, and approaching death. Let's examine one final royal bedchamber, a non-Western example for contrast. You are entering the private chambers of Empress Dowager Cixi of China at the Forbidden City, Beijing, 1900. Cixi is the de facto ruler of China, one of the most powerful women in the world. How do her chambers smell compared to European queens? The smell of incense is prominent. Cixi burns incense constantly, sandalwood, aloes wood, various Chinese incenses. The smoke creates a hazy atmosphere and a strong aromatic smell that is very different from European perfumes. It is woody, resinous, with medicinal undertones. The incense is meant to purify the space and mask other smells. It works partially. The incense smell is dominant, but underlying smells remain. Chinese clothing is different from European loose robes rather than tight corsets, silk rather than wool. The looser clothing allows better air circulation, possibly reducing sweat accumulation compared to tightly laced European garments. But the silk still absorbs body odor. Chinese silk that has been worn multiple times without washing has a distinctive smell, slightly different from European fabrics, but still the smell of unwashed, body plus expensive fabric. Cixi uses Chinese cosmetics, lead-based white powder similar to European cerus, rouge made from safflower, various traditional preparations. These have their own smells, herbal, medicinal, the particular scent combinations of Chinese beauty products. Mixed with her body's natural smells, they create a scent profile that is distinctly Chinese rather than European, but still fundamentally the smell of cosmetics applied over imperfectly clean skin. Tea is omnipresent. Cixi drinks tea constantly, and the smell of tea jasmine, oolong, various Chinese teas permeates her chambers. The scent is pleasant, aromatic, but it also mixes with other smells. Imagine tea scent plus incense plus body odor plus the smell of silk that is absorbed human secretions. It is a different combination from European chambers, but still a combination of luxury and human biology. The Forbidden City's sanitation is more advanced than many European palaces of earlier eras, but still pre-modern. Chamber pots are used, though porcelain rather than European pewter. The waste still smells the same human urine, and feces smell the same regardless of culture. The pots are emptied by servants into the palace's complex sewage system, more advanced than Versailles had. But the smell is still present in private chambers. Cixi is 65 years old in 1900, an elderly woman who has ruled China, officially or unofficially, for decades. She has the smells of age, the old person's skin smell, the smells of a body that has been through decades of life without modern hygiene. She has given birth to one son who became emperor, though he died young. Her body carries the marks of pregnancy, childbirth, age, all creating their own odour signatures. According to research by historian Dr. Sterling Seagrave on Cixi's life, she was known for her elaborate daily routines, including extensive grooming and cosmetic application. But elaborate grooming in 1900 China, like elaborate grooming in 1900 Europe, couldn't create true cleanliness by modern standards. Cixie smelled better than someone who made no effort at grooming, but she still smelled like an elderly woman who bathed infrequently, wore clothes that couldn't be washed, and lived in a palace without modern plumbing. The specific smells were culturally Chinese rather than European, but the fundamental reality-powerful woman living in pre-modern hygiene conditions was the same. The comparison between Cixie's chambers and European queens' chambers reveals both difference and similarity. Different cultural approaches to perfume, clothing, and beauty create different specific smells, but the underlying biological reality is universal. Human bodies produce smells, and without modern hygiene technology, those smells accumulate. A Chinese empress's bedchamber smelled different in its specific notes from a French queen's, but both smelled of human bodies, and both would smell terrible to modern sensibilities. Now, let's reflect one final time on the totality of this sensory history. From ancient Egypt to early 20th century China, across all cultures and all eras, powerful women lived in rooms that smelled of human biology. They couldn't escape it. They used various cultural tools, European heavy perfumes, Chinese incense, Indian spices, African herbs, to try to mask smells. But masking isn't eliminating. The body produces smells, sweat, breath, menstrual blood, vaginal discharge, urine, feces, the smells of illness and age and pregnancy and death. All these are universal human experiences. Queens had the same bodies as peasants. They produced the same smells. The only differences were the specific perfumes used to mask the smells and the quality of fabric absorbing the smells. A queen's silk absorbed her sweat and smelled different from a peasant's wool absorbing sweat, but both absorbed sweat, and both eventually smelled bad. The intimate attendants, ladies-in-waiting servants, the people who attended queens in private chambers, knew the truth about royal bodies. They smelled the queen's chambers, helped with toilet functions, handled bloodied menstrual rags, cleaned up vomit and other body fluids. This intimate smell knowledge was a kind of power knowing that behind the magnificent public image was a human body that smelled like any other body. Throughout history, the powerful have tried to distinguish themselves from the powerless through visual magnificence, elaborate clothing, jewelry, architecture. But smell is harder to control than vision. You can dress magnificently, but you can't help that your body produces smells. Pre-modern queens learned to live with this contradiction, looking magnificent while smelling terrible. Modern people who romanticize royal life usually focus on the visual magnificence and ignore the olfactory reality. But the smell was always there, always part of the experience, always revealing the biology underneath the crown. Let's examine one final dimension, the smell of food and dining in royal bedchambers, because queens often ate privately in their rooms. You are serving Queen Elizabeth a private dinner in her bedchamber, 1590. The food itself has strong smells, roasted meats still dripping with fat, heavily spiced dishes, wine, the elaborate dishes of Elizabethan cuisine. The meat smells intensely of animal, beef, venison, lamb, all roasted and releasing their characteristic smells. In the enclosed space of the bedchamber, the smell of roasted meat is overwhelming. It is not unpleasant if you are hungry, but it is very strong. The smell of fat rendering, of meat juices caramelizing, of animal protein being transformed by heat. Elizabethan cuisine uses heavy spicing, pepper, cloves, cinnamon, nutmeg, mace, ginger. These spices create strong aromatic smells that mix with the meat. The combination is complex, savory meat plus sweet, spicy aromatics. Some dishes use sugar heavily. Elizabeth loves sugar, creating a sweet-savory combination that smells strange to modern palates, accustomed to clear sweet-savory divisions. Elizabeth eats with her hands. Forks aren't in common use yet. Her fingers get greasy with meat fat, sticky with sauces. The grease and sauce remain on her hands after eating. She might wipe her hands on a cloth, but the grease never fully comes off. Her hands smell of food, meat, fat, spices, sugar, for hours after eating. When she touches her face, she transfers food smells to her skin. When she sleeps, her bedding absorbs food smells from her hands and face. Food scraps are left on plates in the room. In the warmth of the bedchamber, food begins to spoil. Meat fat becomes rancid. The smell changes from savory to sour and unpleasant. Sauces separate and smell off. The sugar-heavy dishes attract flies and start to ferment slightly, creating a sour, sweet smell. If Elizabeth gets food on her clothes, likely given eating with hands, the grease stains never fully come out. The fabric absorbs the grease, which slowly becomes rancid. Her elaborate dress might have multiple grease stains from multiple meals, each stain contributing its own smell of old food. Wine is drunk during dinner. Wine has a strong smell, fruity, acidic, alcoholic. If wine is spilled, easy to do when drinking from goblets. It soaks into fabrics and floorboards. Wine stains smell sharp and sour as they age. The room accumulates wine smells over time, especially if Elizabeth dines there frequently. According to research by historian Dr. Linda Levy-Peck on Elizabethan court life, dining was a major activity at court, and food smells were pervasive. Queens who dined in their bedchambers were essentially eating in their bedrooms, creating a mix of food smells and body smells that is unusual to modern sensibilities. We typically separate eating and sleeping spaces. The bedchamber smelled of last night's dinner, plus this morning's body odours, plus old food stains in fabrics. A complex layering of smells that built up over time. Let's examine the smell of royal ceremonies and religious observance that took place in bedchambers. You are attending Queen Catherine of Aragon, first wife of Henry VIII, during her morning prayers in her bedchamber, 1520. Catherine is deeply religious, prays extensively, and her religious practices create specific smells. Incense burns during her prayers, frankincense and myrrh, the traditional church incenses. The smoke creates a hazy atmosphere and a strong resinous smell. It is aromatic, almost medicinal, the smell that is strongly associated with Catholic ritual. The incense smoke is meant to carry prayers to heaven, but it also settles on everything in the room: furniture, fabrics, Catherine's clothes and hair. Everything smells faintly of church incense. Catherine keeps religious relics in her room: fragments of saints' bones, pieces of holy cloth, other sacred objects. Some of these relics are very old, have been handled by many people over centuries. They smell of age and handling, a musty smell of old objects that have absorbed oils from many hands, that have been stored in various conditions, that carry the accumulated smell of centuries. She uses holy water blessed by a priest, kept in a small font in her room. The water sits stagnant between blessings. Stagnant water develops a smell, slightly algal, organic, the smell of water where microorganisms are growing. She sprinkles this water on herself during prayers, adding its slightly stale smell to her own body's smells. Catherine prays kneeling on a hard floor or prayer cushion for extended periods. The physical exertion of extended kneeling causes her to sweat. The sweat mixes with incense smoke clinging to her clothes, creating a combination smell of body odour plus frankincense. This is the smell of medieval piety, human sweat, mixed with church incense. She fasts frequently. Catholic religious observance includes regular fasting. During fasting, her breath changes, develops the slightly sweet, acetone smell of a body burning fat instead of carbohydrates. This fasting breath adds to her overall smell profile during religious observances, marking her as someone engaged in physical mortification as spiritual practice. According to research by historian Dr. Garrett Mattingly on Catherine of Aragon, her religious devotion intensified after Henry VIII began seeking annulment of their marriage. She spent increasing time in prayer in her chambers, surrounded by religious objects, and incense smoke, her body producing the smells of fasting and penitential practice. Her bedchamber became a space of religious retreat, smelling of incense and candle wax, and the body odours of someone spending hours in prayer and physical mortification. Now, let's examine the smell of royal illness in detail. What chronic illnesses smelled like when queens suffered for years. You are attending Mary II of England before her fatal smallpox infection during one of her chronic illnesses. She has recurrent respiratory infections. The bedchamber smells of sickness. Mary has been coughing for weeks, a deep, productive cough that brings up phlegm. The phlegm is yellow-green, thick, sometimes streaked with blood. She coughs into cloths, which accumulate in her room. The smell of respiratory infection is distinctive, a thick, organic smell of mucus mixed with bacterial infection. The cough cloth smell of sickness. The phlegm has dried and concentrated, creating a smell that is unmistakably illness. Her breath smells of infection, the smell coming from her lungs, from infected mucus in her airways. When she coughs, she exhales a smell of sick lungs, warm, moist, infected air that smells organic and wrong. Everyone near her can smell that she is ill from her breath and cough. Fever produces its own smell. Fever sweat smells different from normal sweat, sharper and more chemical. Mary's body is fighting infection, and the byproducts of that fight come through in her sweat. She sweats heavily during fever, soaking her shifts. The sweat smells sickly, sweet, the smell of a body in crisis. The medicines prescribed smell terrible. She is given various herbal preparations, tinctures, teas, poultices. These have strong herbal smells, bitter, medicinal, often unpleasant. Some medicines make her vomit, adding the smell of vomit to the general atmosphere of sickness. The room smells like a medieval sick room. Infection, herbal medicines, body fluids, the complex smell of illness being treated with inadequate medicine. Chronic illness means Mary spends extended time in bed. The bedding absorbs all the smells of illness. Fever, sweat, cough, phlegm, medicine spills, the general smell of a sick body spending days or weeks in the same bed. The sheets are changed when heavily soiled, but they never smell fresh. They always carry the smell of previous illness, of chronic sickness that has been present for months. According to research on Mary II's health by historian Dr. Tony Claydon, she suffered from recurrent illness throughout her reign as joint monarch with William III. She had respiratory infections, possibly chronic bronchitis or early tuberculosis. Her chambers smelled of chronic illness, the ongoing smell of a body that is frequently sick, that is fighting infections without antibiotics, that is struggling with health problems that won't fully resolve. When she finally died of smallpox in 1694, her already weakened body was overwhelmed by the infection. Her chambers had long smelled of illness. They just smelled of death illness in those final days. Finally, let's examine the smell of royal abandonment. What happened to bedchambers when queens fell from favour and were imprisoned or exiled? You are entering the chambers at Pontefract Castle, where Richard II's wife, Queen Isabella of Valois, was briefly held in 1399 before being returned to France. The room smells of neglect and fear. Isabella is young, only about 10 years old, and has been suddenly removed from her position as Queen of England after Richard II was deposed. Her chambers at Pontefract are far less grand than her royal apartments were. The neglect is visible and olfactory. The room hasn't been properly cleaned. Rushes on the floor haven't been changed. Chamber pots aren't being emptied promptly. Basic maintenance isn't happening. The smell of fear is present. Isabella is frightened, producing stress sweat. She is too young to understand fully what is happening politically, but she knows she has been taken from her home, imprisoned, her future uncertain. Fear sweat smells sharp and acrid, different from normal sweat. The room smells of a frightened child's body odour. Her clothes aren't being changed regularly in prison. Even royal prison, laundry isn't a priority. She wears the same shift for extended periods, building up smells. Her elaborate royal gowns from happier times hang unused. She has nothing appropriate to her new, diminished circumstances. The clothes smell of the transition from power to powerlessness. Expensive fabrics that haven't been aired or maintained, slowly accumulating musty smells of neglect. Food brought to her is simple, not the elaborate royal meals she is accustomed to. Sometimes food isn't brought promptly. She might go hungry. The hunger affects her body, creates the sweet acetone breath of a body burning its own fat, creates the empty smell of a digestive system with nothing to digest. Childhood imprisonment smells different from adult imprisonment. It smells of bewildered fear rather than understanding of one's political situation. According to research by historian Dr. Helen Castor, young Isabella's imprisonment was brief. She was returned to France as part of political negotiations, but those weeks or months of imprisonment created smell memories of fear, of neglect, of the sudden absence of all the luxury and care she'd known as Queen of England. Her bedchamber at Pontefract smelled nothing like her royal chambers at Windsor or Westminster. It smelled like abandonment, like childhood fear, like power stripped away, leaving only vulnerability. The contrast between the elaborate, perfumed chambers of powerful queens and the neglected chambers of deposed or imprisoned queens reveals how intimately smell connects to power. Powerful queens have servants to empty chamber pots frequently, to burn incense, to apply perfumes, to maintain some attempt at managing smells. Powerless queens have none of this. The chamber pots fill up and smell terrible because no one empties them promptly. The body smells terrible because no one brings clean clothes or helps with bathing. Power smells like perfume and incense, trying to mask body odor. Powerlessness smells like body odor and waste with no attempt at masking. Throughout this exploration of royal bedchambers, we've seen that smell reveals truth, that visual magnificence conceals. Portraits show queens in elaborate clothes and jewels, looking powerful and idealized. But those portraits can't convey the smell, the body odor, the rotting teeth, the chamber pots, the chronic infections, the accumulated funk of daily life without modern hygiene. The smell was always there underneath the magnificence. Every elaborately dressed queen in every portrait smelled like a human body, sweating, bleeding, defecating, producing all the smells that humans produce. The difference between queens and peasants wasn't that queens didn't smell. It is that queens had expensive perfumes to partially mask the smell and expensive fabrics to absorb it. But the fundamental biological reality was the same. Human bodies smell, and pre-modern people lived with that reality every day. The attendants who served in royal bedchambers knew this. They smelled the queen's bodies, handled the waste, dealt with the biological reality behind the public image. This knowledge was a kind of intimacy, and also a kind of power, knowing the truth about royal bodies, seeing or rather smelling behind the facade of magnificence to the ordinary, smelly human underneath. Sweet dreams, and may you wake tomorrow grateful for modern sanitation, for daily showers, for flush toilets, for soap and deodorant, and all the technologies that allow us to live without being constantly surrounded by our own and others' body odors. The queens of the past lived in magnificent palaces that smelled like sewers. They wielded enormous power while their teeth rotted in their mouths and their bodies produced smells that would make us vomit. Remember that history smelled terrible, that power couldn't buy cleanliness, and perhaps be a little less envious of royalty who lived lives of gilded squalor. Good night.